Hi there. My name is Sam, the new Texan, and I'd like to share with y'all my Pokemon experience and why I, as a casual, loyal, and quite frankly, diehard fan, won't be continuing with the series anymore. This script first started out with watching a lot of Pokemon retrospectives, but over the month, it just gradually morphed between finding out new features in Pokemon Go and Pokemon Home with Pokemon Bank, and then also just the downslide in quality we've had with the games. I'll touch on all of this as we come across it later, but for now, I just want to share with y'all my experience. A little disclaimer as I go along with the script. Just be prepared to hear that I don't know or I don't really remember, only for me to then remember and unlock these memories. I originally wanted to cut those out, but I want to see I want y'all to see how the script developed as well as I kept on going through it, revising, editing it. So just consider that like a quirk. And along with this, I want to share what I like and what I dislike about the games from each respective generation. So think of it more as a thought exercise for me, while y'all just get to listen to my story and my journey, quite frankly, throughout the Pokemon universe. I hope y'all enjoy. So, Gen 1. I'll never forget getting my first Game Boy Color. it's, a, it's a fun time, actually. I remember it was in the cabinet above the stove in a previous house of ours. I don't know why or how it got there, as I like to go in and out of the cabinets quite a bit, but one day when I was in the cabinets, there it was. And I remember seeing it, and it was the green colored one. I had the green Game Boy Color, and I remember seeing this yellow cartridge in it. And I hadn't really paid attention to games all that much from Nintendo regarding the Game Boy Color. I was only about 5 or 6. I had grown up in a Nintendo household, and this household still is Nintendo. But that was really my first time dealing with portable games. And it really set the whole portable game genre for me. At that time, my father was big into the NES and SNES. We played quite a bit. He, the classic. He would die in Super Mario Bros. Hand the controller to me. I would die. I would hand it back to him. That sort of things. You know, that's how we bonded, was through video games, and quite frankly, that's how I found my love, was through video games. I remember too, we got the N64 when it had just released. So yeah, that's how old I am. I'm a little older than the N64. I guess Yellow was maybe a gift for me. It was released on September 12th. I guess it was around this time when I found it. I'm not too sure, like I said. But 10 days away from September 12th is my birthday, so, who's to say? I remember when I first looked at it, I was like, what is this? And then, I booted it up just out of sheer curiosity. And I started playing it, and then my father came in, and I quickly turned it off. And I was like, I didn't find anything. I thought I had been busted. And he told me it was a gift for me. And so that's how I got introduced to Pokemon, was through that gift. Little did I know, that gift would lead to the journey of a lifetime for me. I had no idea what was in store, nor did nor do I really appreciate it, or have come to appreciate it like I know now. Since I was still a kid, gaming was still purely for entertainment. The colors, the flashes, the visuals. Well, visuals of the 1900s that you can get. I know that's how I played the first two generations, for sure, was through visuals. The flashes of thunder, fire blasts with the little flame sprites, hydro pump bursting out from under the Pokemon. That always excited me. Surf was another favorite move of mine at that time. And I know for sure when I was alone, I would make the noises. In fact, I still kind of do to this day. But that's just because that that was what made Pokemon fun, was pretending like you were fighting in real life. Even though I know I wasn't, I sure as heck felt like I was with those Pokemon. Now, at that time, I was also in kindergarten. I had just started kindergarten at a charter school. And I had broken my leg that same year. In fact, it was barely maybe even a month later when I broke my leg. So because of that, I'm pretty sure I missed out on all the Mew under the truck gossip, or Mew 3, or whatever else there was at that time. But so yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to experience that part of playground gossip, mainly because I was out with a broken leg. In fact, I would be out for that, gosh, until about Christmas time. I think I returned to school that last week for Christmas. Anyways, what I will say though is that around the neighborhood, we sure did talk. I don't remember hearing about Mew under the truck or Mew 3, though, but we sure did talk a lot in the neighborhood, and for some reason, everybody seemed to have yellow as well. And so it was weird because we didn't have link cables, but when Pokemon Stadium came out, we sure did trade a lot. And I mean a lot. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But first, let me get through the movie. That was actually how I heard about Mew, was through the first movie. I was at one of my cousin's houses that lived on the same street, and he showed me this card. And it was actually the Ancient Mew card that came with the movie when it released in theaters as a promotional item. And at that time, I was just so weirded out by it. I mean, I was like freaked out by that card. I mean, you're showing like an ancient hieroglyphic card to a 6-year-old kid who's barely, comprehending Pokemon as it is. Yeah, they're going to be a little freaked out. And to be honest, to this day, anytime I see it, I'm still a little weirded out by it. I remember thinking for sure, who was that Pokemon? And then, was it good or evil? Because it's ancient, Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And then I also remember thinking, what's cloning? You're throwing such a new concept at that time to a kid. Well, new-ish, I guess. But I just remember thinking, okay, is Mewtwo bad or is Mew bad because it was cloned? Just a lot of questions going through my head. And I know I had caught Mewtwo before the movie came out, so at least I knew a little bit about Mewtwo. But Mew, on the other hand, it was just, yeah, it was like, what the heck is this? So I know I saw the movie when my parents got it for me after it came out on home release. No, we never did go to the theater, now that I think about it. It was only when it came out on home release for VHS. Another good time right there. Who remembers getting VHS tapes when they first come out? Ash turning into stone? I'm sure I cried. Who wouldn't have? And speaking of Ash, I guess I was into the anime when it was going on. I don't recall. I'm sure I was. More on that in just a little bit as well. And I say that because I know I had merchandise, and I was already enthralled that way with the merchandise. I had a Pokemon pillow, a huge Charizard plushie, talking Pikachu, a small Pikachu plushie, and I had my own my own very Pokedex that talked just like the one in the anime. So that's why I'm like, I'm sure I watched the anime because I had a dex just like Ash had a dex. One of the last things I had at that time was a Togepi plush as well, even though we didn't quite know what a Togepi was exactly. I remember that being like a whole thing. What's a Togepi? And then what's a Meryl as we get closer to Gen 2? Just good times that way, trying to figure it out with everybody in the neighborhood. I also remember having this figurine Pokemon Stadium game. You would plug Pokemon into the stadium, and it was I don't quite know how to explain it. You had like a strong attack, I think, and a weak attack, but I really can't remember this because it was like in and out of my life so fast. I remember it came with cards too, and it would help you keep track of damage, but it was like in integrals of, I think, 10 or, yeah, 10 HP, maybe 5. I don't see, that's the thing. I just don't remember. I probably have those cards somewhere, but I kind of doubt it now. Speaking of cards that I know I do have from that time are the training cards still. Boy, at that time, the trading card fever was really starting to grab hold of me, and it would peak during the time of Gen 4, during Sinnoh, when it was me and my brother mainly. I'll get to that way later, though. Now, everybody on the block had trading cards. Yeah, we would trade quite a bit as well. Just like we trade with our yellow games, we would trade with trading cards. However, with school, I didn't dare take them to school. I was fearful that the teachers would take my cards away, so I really didn't want that happening. Just because I had some pretty good cards at that time. I remember anytime anyone got a new pack in the block, we would try to just jostle each other and try to ante up to see, hey, I see you got this new card. Will you trade for this card? you know, Typical kid stuff when it comes to trading, which, now that I think about it, is that like gambling? I don't think it is. Anyways, like I said, I still have most of those cards. I even got a Southern Island set binder with some of the cards. And I still have some of those cards. I know I traded away some of them, and some of them are probably lost to posterity. But I know I have the binder for sure, even though it's well loved and well used from someone who has been using it over the decades till they found out how valuable it is. In any case, I'll never forget the day one of the neighborhood kids decided he would trade his holographic Charizard card for something rare he didn't have. I can't remember exactly what he was looking for, but I think it was a holographic Machamp at the time, which was also another highly sought card, at least on my block at that time. I had a birthday Pikachu card, but, you know, I was in kindergarten, and I was learning how to fill in blanks. You put your name here anytime you do your paperwork, and so that Pikachu card has a blank, and guess what I did? That's right, I filled it in with my own name. After all, nobody thought these cards would be worth anything. So because of my name on the card, the kid decided not to trade with me. I mean, I was so close. I was doing all the negotiating I can, but, uh, no speech 100 here for that little 5-year-old me, 6-year-old me. So that's fine. I was fine with it. Till I saw the price, I think, in 2016. I really could have been set for life. I really could have. But joking aside, even now, it's not really a big deal. I mean, it is what it is at this point. I've definitely made my peace with it. I know there's some people out there that want it. More power to you. Charizard's not one of my favorite Pokemon. And I know that's like blasphemy, but it just isn't. But getting back to the games. Remember those spin-off games, Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Puzzle League? I know I didn't beat Snap, but I sure did beat Puzzle League. Yeah, I remember Puzzle League more for some reason. Everybody was into Snap, but I just like Puzzle League. And even though I know we have Snap on the Virtual Console on the Switch, I still prefer to play Puzzle League. I don't know why. I guess I just like puzzles a bit more. Don't get me wrong, I like Pokemon Snap. I think it's a great game. Just in my opinion, I prefer Pokemon Puzzle League. I do remember one day, one of the neighborhood kids came over and showed me this new game, though, for the 64, and it was Pokemon Stadium. And, oh boy, to say X and Y was my first 3D Pokemon game would be an utter lie, because it was Pokemon Stadium. And, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many battles we did, me and the neighborhood kids. Oh, it was like tournament weekend every weekend for a good year. Gosh, that was That was so fun, just getting tensed up and, with the rising tension between the battle, animations, the music, the announcer. Gosh, that announcer. God bless him. And then on top of that, physical blows felt strong. Special attacks felt so real. And even status moves felt alive in their own waves. After all, if you got hit with the thunder, it looked painful. It sounded painful. And even moves like Harden, that was golden, quite literally. And speaking of Harden, those mini games were actually how me and my friends ended a good session. Anytime we were battling, that, or we would just use it as kind of an interlude to just kind of settle down. I mean, I guess even 6-year-old kids need to settle down and whatnot as much as they can. But yeah, coming back to the trade evolutions, that's actually how we found out to get Alakazam, Golem, and Machamp. But for some reason, we never traded them. 6-year-olds, what are you gonna do? We would trade, but has the year went around, or has the year just kind of kept on dragging? We didn't trade as much. We started really getting attached to the Pokemon we had, and so for some reason, we didn't really want to trade them. And I say for some reason because this next sentence is going to sound absolutely crazy. For gosh, we would trade each other's Pikachu's and legendaries though, but for any other reason, it was like, no, I don't really want to give you my Squirtle. No, I don't really want to give you my Bulbasaur. I don't know. Kids, we had kid logic for sure. That's for sure. It was a good way of finding out what Pokemon weren't in the Pokedex at that time, too. None of us really knew about Pokemon being locked up behind the different generations at that time. Or, well, now, even now, there's still different Pokemon in different colored games. At that time, though, I don't know. I guess we weren't watching the TV well. I guess we were all watching Mewtwo, the movie, over the TV. But that was actually how we figured out that, oh, hey, there's some Pokemon that aren't in here. And it wasn't until another friend of mine that was like, oh, yeah, no, I have this Pokemon here, but I can't really trade it because the battery's dead. Yeah, even back then, his battery had died. I guess he left that Game Boy Color running for freaking ever. I don't know. Or it came with a bad battery, I guess. Not too sure. But yeah, because of that, I felt like I couldn't complete the Pokedex. And it really bothered me because that was my mission from Professor Oak. I was going to complete that Pokedex. And nothing was going to stop me. Except for this. And I just remember it bothered me so much to see holes in the Pokedex that I didn't know how to fill up. It ended up being Electabuzz and Magmar. And those are two Pokemon you can't get in yellow. And like I said, for some reason, all of us had yellow. I don't know how to explain it, but that's just how it worked on the block. So that's where one of my cousins enters with the Game Shark. My cousin was in his early 20s, and he liked video games too. He'd play with me, and I'll never forget him coming home one day from school, later in kindergarten after I was back, and I saw him on top of the castle in Mario 64. He did something that I was hardcore struggling with. But I'll honor him another time when I talk about my Mario story. Because that really sticks with me, even now. He would play Pokemon Stadium 2 with me, and he even made me a painting of Ash and Pikachu that I still have to this day. I would later come to find out, gosh, I guess it was in Gen 6 or 7, when he came for Thanksgiving one time with his girlfriend after he moved away. He asked me if I was still into Pokemon at that time, and I said I was. And he said, I don't know how you I don't know how you got the hold of that at such a young age. And for him to say that to me at that time was just so shocking because he was by far one of the smartest people I knew. So for him to say that to me, yeah, it really, even now, it's still, it hits close to home still. Anyways, I'll talk more about him in Mario video whenever I do that. But yeah, he gave me a Game Shark, and I still have that to today as well. And at that time, I didn't know what a Game Shark was, much less how to work it. So for the time being, I was left waiting to hack. With all that being said, though, I feel it's time to wrap up, and we proceed to the new generation as we keep on going about with my story here. And it's time for what I consider my home generation: gold, silver, and crystal. Gen 2. Such fond memories. With the release of Gen 2, I honestly didn't know it was coming out. As, as a little kid and all, you lose focus pretty fast on even games that you like. New games come out, you play those. You go back to the games you like. You go back and forth. And at that time, without there really being an internet, we just didn't know. We flat out didn't know. I'm sure it was on the TV. I'm sure I saw it as a commercial. But, I was hooked onto other things. I know I was on a big Star Fox kick at that time. When a friend found it on the street, how the heck that happened, I have no idea. Not a friend, a cousin. Because I remember him coming to my house, and he was like, "Look, I just found this on the street," and it was Star Fox, and that's where my love of Star Fox began. But all I remember was I was with my family, and we were in Walmart. And my mom and I went to the electronics section. Gosh, sorry. And that's when I saw it. I saw Pokemon Gold, and I saw Pokemon Silver. And I know I was begging at that time for the game. I have no doubt in kidding me. And so I know when it came to choosing, I chose Silver. And I got to play what would become, honestly, one of the most favorite games for me to this day. I could play it nonstop. I honestly could. that's how impactful Silver was for me. I just remember booting it up and then thinking, there's a whole new Pokedex to catch? What? There's a whole new land? An egg? Am I gonna get a Togepi? Is that what's happening? And it is? Well, I'll be darned. Now I have a Togepi that I can explore with. And now I actually understand what this little Togepi plush is. And, starters, Cyndaquil? Ooh, it's like a fire porcupine or something. I don't know. Well, I like Quilava too. And Typhlosion, well, that's just a cool name. I remember thinking that. Typhlosion? What a cool name for a cool Pokemon. It was just a joy to play the Johto. It was a joy to go to Ecruteak. It was a joy to go to Goldenrod. It was a joy to even go to Cyanwood. All those cities, all those towns, it was a joy. All the routes, the forest, the caves. It was all a joy for me. And when I went to the Brass Tower in Ecruteak City, I didn't quite comprehend at that time what I was dealing with. That was the moment when I got to the basement and I saw the legendary dogs come to life and flee. Flee? I thought it was a boss fight. But they ran. Why'd they run? Well, in Crystal, Suicune will stop and cry before fleeing. And even though I thought I was going to fight it right then and there, the concept of a roaming legendary was not only new to me, but to all of us at that time. Sprites or legendaries at that time just did not run. You fought them. You fought Articuno, you fought Moltres, you fought Zapdos. They would make their cry, and you would fight them. So for them to run, it was a paradigm shift for me, for a little 7-year-old me at that time. good grief. I remember it just being so hard to find them. I would chase after them. I didn't understand you could choose the routes. But I'll tell you what did make me understand that. Game renters and game FAQs. When, those two were coming around. And that's exactly how I learned how to choose the routes. And that's honestly top tip number 2 for me. If you have a roaming legendary. And then top tip number 1 is to use the Master Ball so you don't have to worry about chasing it anymore. Especially if you're on that last one. Yeah. So choose the routes I did. Go between the town, go between the route, town, route. And lo and behold, my first one was Entei. And I managed to catch it. And I finished out my team with it, actually. Yes, I had a Typhlosion and I had Entei. So what? Now, remember that this was after I also caught Lugia, but that doesn't matter. I had a legendary dog. I felt powerful. I was feeling like that little girl in the third Pokemon movie. I felt like it could cause Crystal to grow wherever it stepped. And I legitimately thought that was its power. So yeah, it took a while. I was pretty naive as a kid. So it took maybe a year, to be honest. Yeah, about a year. So, with my full Pokemon team, we went back to the Indigo Plateau. When I stepped foot in Kanto, I felt so excited. I'll never forget that guy where he's like, hey, you know what you just did, right? You just entered into Kanto. I had a feeling that we could explore Kanto eventually, because why wouldn't they allow this? After all, I felt like Pokemon was connected, or at least the land masses, and we could explore the whole world, I was hoping. It was like, all right, this area will be for one game, this area will be for another game, but you can, it's all connected. You can explore it all. So, yeah, sure enough, I was proven right. And then I went and beat the Elite Four. And I was even more excited because I knew then, because we had stepped into Kanto, we could just explore the rest of Kanto in gold and silver and crystal. And so, yeah, I rushed all the way to Pallet Town to talk to Oak. I thought we were going to get a Kanto starter, but no Kanto starter? Well, okay, that's fine. I'll just go see Brock, see if he's like in yellow or red and blue. Maybe, I don't know. I was expecting to start over in a sense. It was even back then. I was really confused with the whole thing. I thought I need to get a new team, and sure enough, it turned out no, you don't, because yeah, Brock was strong. That's okay. I'll go see Misty. How strong is Misty? Oh, she's strong too. Well, okay, this is gonna be interesting. In fact, those teams at that time were on par with the team that I had. And so I wondered what the heck was going on. This is where the concept of an end game had become a concept for me. Back then, games didn't really have an end game, at least the ones that I were playing. Mario 64, you got 120 stars. Well, you get Yoshi, you get 120 lives. It capped out at 99, I think, but that was a reward. Star Fox 64, you complete it completely. Well, okay, you get the glasses on Fox in the start screen, but there wasn't really an end game. It was just, all right, you can just continue playing like normal. So it was really Pokemon, oddly enough, that introduced the concept of an end game for me. Boy, did I enjoy that. I felt like I was replaying Yellow, but in a different game. It was, I don't know how to describe it. It was so fun. The route themes were different, and the fights, oh, those fights were so good. And I remember one Saturday while we went to a huge flea market in the town next door, that's when I started scaling Mount Silver. And I finally got to him. The man who just says, ... with the final battle in 3. I honestly wasn't expecting a fight after exploring all this way. I was just wondering what was in this chamber. After all, I was looking for a Larvitar to catch. And I think I spent maybe half an hour on the fight. It really took a toll on me because I was not prepared at all. I mean, this is a 6-7-year-old kid battling through just looking for a Larvitar, while making his team stronger. So, yeah, I definitely wasn't prepared for that fight. But I beat him. I beat Red. And just like that, I was done battle-wise. At least until Pokemon Stadium 2 came out. I already had Pokemon Stadium 2, so it's kind of a chicken or the egg question regarding which Red I came across first. But the important question for me was, what would the Kanto genes sound like in that game, in Pokemon Stadium 2? So I surely rushed through with my Silver team. And I know I struggled with the Elite Four, but when I got to the Kanto area in Pokemon Stadium 2, oh, man, I was ready to fight each gym leader. I just need to bait through. Oh, what? Oh, it's just them? Well, that's fine. So, to this day, I will die on this hill. To this day, I think that the Kanto Gym Leader theme from Pokemon Stadium 2 is the best version of those Kanto themes. I also like to state that this game has some of my favorite animations for so many attacks for the Pokemon. And the Pokemon themselves even. Sacred Fire in particular, it just looks hecka hurtful. Aeroblast has to have a mention too, and I also remember liking Sweet Scent, so I would use that a lot, especially in Pokemon Stadium 2. What can I say? I'm just a sucker for good-looking moves. Even a little kid back then knew good-looking moves. So, I'll have to find this video, but I will link it, and it shows all the moves from Pokemon Stadium 2. And, oh man, let me just say, just looking at those moves, thinking what beat up looks like in particular, it just leaves me wondering why. Or how about even stat moves like Belly Drum, where it has both the HP cut in half and the attack raised at the same time. I mean, you had moves like this working better in Pokemon Stadium 2 than they do now. If they could do it back then, where they would cut, where it would show the text box saying, attack and defense lowered, speed raised, or, or just something like that, What was it? Oh gosh, I'm thinking of the move Curse. I know I am. Attack and defense raised, speed lowered. That's what it is. They did that all at once. It was all in one text box. It was all in one animation at the same time happening in Pokemon Stadium 2. Whereas with the newer games, it takes attack raised, click. Defense raised, click. Speed lowered, click. I don't understand. They could really learn from earlier games, I feel. And I feel that's one thing that kids today just, they won't ever see that. And they won't understand. So, even looking back there, the cracks are already starting to show, but not yet. They're slowly starting to come. And that would happen in Gen 3. Another small thing I want to talk about from both Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2, just by sound alone, you would know if an attack was going to miss. I don't know how to describe it, but especially moves like Horn Drill or Guillotine, those sound effects, you would know if it would hit or if it was going to miss, even before it showed the animation. So, that kind of led for a tense moment, but it's just, it's a small thing like that I dearly miss. I feel like bringing that back could especially add to the tension of battling. Gosh, it just felt so good to have a one-hit KO hit. I don't know. That and the announcer, of course. And last thing I want to talk about, that little nightmare dash curse imp that they used for the animations, back then, that legitimately scared me. And now that I think about it, it looks like a dark flying type Chow from Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. So, little fun fact right there. I don't know, maybe they just kind of had the same model design. I don't know, maybe it was just kind of both of them just stumbled upon it. Anyways, let's talk about the other merchandise now. For this generation, I don't really remember owing as much. I know I got the cards every now and then, and like before, I still have those cards to now. In particular, I now have a Shining Charizard and a Shining Celebi card. After all, why have a shiny holographic Charizard when you can have a shining Charizard? I also had some dark and light Pokemon cards. And even back then I was wondering, were these going to be new types in the game? After all, they just added steel and dark, so, there's the dark right there, but they're not showing dark. They're showing what, they were their own type still, so it was like, what's going on here? So I thought an affinity system that worked on it, like if you liked it or not, would become light or dark. After all, when a Pokemon hates you, frustration's stronger, while when they like you, return is stronger. And back then, I was all about the friendship with my Pokemon. I know I was going back and forth to Goldenrod City and checking with the friendship value. I have no doubt. I mean, even to this day, it's something that I truly value within Pokemon, is the friendship value. I didn't think anything would come of this other than maybe just an affinity system, but gosh, had I known about Shadow Pokemon from Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD Gale Darkness, I know my mind probably would have been blown. And, maybe that's what it was teasing. Maybe they were working out that kink and just trying to figure out what to do with it. I don't know. Maybe it was like a sneak preview. Aside from the cards, I do remember that I had a shiny, not a shiny, sorry, a tiny Pichu figurine. But I know, I know for a fact, it was confiscated by my second grade teacher along with a Pikachu eraser. And since I went to a small charter school, I had this teacher multiple times throughout my years, and I never let her live it down. She always told me she would return it, but I know that was long gone. After all, schools were still hardcore cracking down on the merchandise. Any merchandise in the schools. The Pokemon cards, Pokemon figurines, like I had, even erasers. It's like it's kind of getting ridiculous at this point. An eraser, I mean, kids make mistakes at the time. They got erased. Anyways, so before we move on to Gen 3, remember that Game Shark? This was the generation I fully learned how to work it. Honestly, don't remember if I got a code book, or if a friend had one, or if I found it online. Remember when code books were a thing? But I finally figured out how to use it, and suddenly I'm catching level 4 and level 5 Lugia. And, and honestly, that's like the last memory I have of this generation was me just seeing what I could make, what I could hack in. Now, although my hacking days wouldn't really come into full yet, this is definitely where it started. Just to see, just to have fun. Also, I'd like to say before we move on that Aeroblast in the games in GSC is one of my favorite moves to watch in the generation. It just looks so intense. So, with that being said, let's move on to Gen 3 now. Gen 3. Alright, so let's get this started, shall we? Nah, I'm just kidding. My introduction to Gen 3 was one of the games where my friend actually introduced it to me in school. I know we were waiting for our parents after school, so he had his Game Boy Advance with him, and he just started playing this blue looking colored cartridge on the GBA. That's right, he had Sapphire. And I remember thinking, what are these graphics? And I was, you know, really kind of at a loss at the time. And it turns out he had just barely started. He was in Oldale Town. He got into a fight. He was like, hey, you want to see the new Pokemon? I was like, sure. And I remember him sending out Torchic. And I have to say, even back then, I think this was my first time. I was like, oh, I don't know. At that time, I was like, design was okay, but it had a big head for me at the time, and I was just like, I don't know about this one. Torchic, I eventually came to like on my own. It's just at first impression, I was just kind of like, okay. So I'm sure I begged my parents to go and get it, and I don't remember when I got it, but I do know I got it from Circuit City. That Christmas, I also got Pokemon Sapphire. So that was the first time two games were starting to be bought. That was the first time I started to buy the two different well, in this case, get gifted the two different versions. I don't remember if I gave Sapphire to my brother or not. I do remember going missing, and I know it's been long gone since. I didn't get far in Sapphire, so that's fine. But in Ruby, I chose Torchic as well. After all, why not start with a Pokemon that, I don't know. My friend said it evolved into something cool, but I gotta see this for myself, so that's why I chose Torchic. And boy, he wasn't wrong. Gosh, Blaziken is just one of my favorites to this day. I would much rather take Blaziken over Charizard. That's another hill I'm dying on. Yeah, I don't know. Mudkip didn't really interest me, and Trico didn't really. I found Trico to be just kind of too generic, I guess you could say. Well, Mudkip, I was like, well, it's cute, but I don't know. Anyways, I'll get off the designs of them. So I do want to mention though, I know I didn't talk about this in either of the previous two generations, but with Gen 1, with having yellow, I never had to choose a starter Pokemon. It was given to me with Pikachu after all. So honestly, I thought that choosing your starter was more of a Gen 2 choice until I played Pokemon Blue around '05 and '06. And that's when I found out that, the choice had been around ever since Kanto. So I have to say, regarding starters, it's the main reason why I don't have that strong an attachment to the Kanto starters. And honestly, I don't understand why people fight so much between those Kanto starters. After all, I had the best one of all. I had Pikachu, you know. It was given to me. I didn't have to choose. That's fine with me. Off that tangent, let's get back to Hoenn now. I don't really have anything remarkable to say about it, other than I just enjoyed it a lot, mainly because it was a new Pokemon game. But the favorite Pokemon from that gen, Plusle has to be one of them, and I know I hunted at least 3 hours to get Minun, because they had the whole double battle mechanic thing that they were pushing. If you have a Plusle with Minun, you're gonna do better. But other than that, I don't remember using them much. And I have to say, I don't think I talked about it in Gen 2. My favorite one from Gen 2 is Sunkern. I don't know. It's just something about it. It's so cute and it just makes me feel good looking at it. But anyways, that hunt for Minun honestly has to be one of my first Pokemon hunts. Aside from the roaming legendaries. Even though they weren't good in battle, that was okay. I had my two little buddies with me. I do remember having a hard time against Winona of Fortree City with her Altaria. I think that was the first time I actually had to deal with, a wall in Pokemon. Aside from Red. But he was an end game boss. This was mid journey still, kind of getting on the end. So yeah, Winona with her Altaria. I had no idea what I was doing at that point because I was trying to figure out what type it was, but it was just not working for me. I didn't have a good team for it, and it just set up and it started tearing into me. And I know I was really close to losing, but chip damage thankfully took it out. So that's that was honestly one of the first times I remember I was just like, oh my gosh. So good on Game Freak for that little surprise right there. And then I remember seeing Kyogre and Groudon fight, and even though it's even though it's just little sprites fighting, I thought that was epic. That was the first time we were seeing anything like that after all. And so, since I had Ruby, I get Groudon, and I caught it, and I felt like I could just win all the way with Eruption. And honestly, I'm sure Blaziken and Groudon carried me all the way, in the Elite Four especially. Maybe not against Wallace, but afterwards. And then I remember finding this one route between Pacific Log and Slateport City and a diving hole. I went there and I was just baffled. What is this place? And the wall had Braille on it. And I was just like, wait, what the heck? So I asked my friend about it, my old friend. And he said his older brother had figured it out by using the Braille lettering that was in the booklet the game came with. And thankfully, I had not thrown away my box or the booklet. So I got out my booklet, and lo and behold, that's how I came across Regirock. And I was absolutely terrified of this sucker. I mean, what were those eyes? Why was it sealed? I felt like I was unleashing an evil upon the world. But honestly, we'd have to wait 6 more generations for that. It was also around the same time that my old friend and we also found out something special. And it was another hacking device, is the AR. Now, it was owned by a friend of his older brothers, so they always had first dibs. Every now and then they'd share it, but honestly, not much. But boy, when we got into it, we got into it. We abused it. Use and abuse. So I'll never forget sitting in his bathroom, and we were just cheating every Pokemon into the game that we could. We had to steal the AR quite a bit, so that's why we rushed into the bathroom, because honestly, they're just going to be like, okay, one of them went into the bathroom. But yeah, so we went into this bathroom and we cheated everything. That even includes all the different unknown forms. Master Balls times 999? No problem. Every battery times 999? Sure. Rare candies? Why not? It was through the AR that I learned how friendship worked regarding the move Return and Frustration. After all, my Blaziken knew Return, and I was still on that big friendship kick. So I knew it was dealing, quite a bit of damage. But after I used a lot of rare candies on my Blaziken, I noticed it wasn't doing that much. So that was honestly how I learned some mechanics, was through hacking, oddly enough. You'd think I wouldn't like the AR device because of other things, but it was actually because of this, even though friendship can really be remedied really easily. I mean, you just walk. But yeah, it's because it lowered my friendship values with my Blaziken that I just didn't want to use it. So it was right after using the AR device that I also found out about Pokerus. Boy, did I use and abuse that mechanic as well by giving my Pokemon Pokerus. I made sure everybody had it, even my bad egg. Bad egg? That was also another reason why I didn't trust the AR devices. Every now and then, you'd get a bad egg if there was an incorrect code. And it was an anti-cheating mechanism the game had in it. And honestly, to these days, I still have them. And I just like to think, they're just rotten Pokemon eggs by a chicken Pokemon or something. Some unknown chicken Pokemon that we don't know about. And I definitely know I tried to hatch one of them because, oh gosh, it really broke my game when it would try to hatch. So thankfully, I had not saved before it was getting close to hatching. So I remember no more bad eggs, no more bad egg hatching for me. Nothing. Don't want bad eggs. I'll just take the normal eggs and I'll just hatch those. And boy, talk about hatching some eggs. You'd think I'd run into a shiny Pokemon that way, but actually, no, that did not happen. My first shiny happened was where that happened was behind Route 104, where the flower shop is, right before you get to Roseboro City. I know we were on a trip, and I just remember spending just a few hours just going back and forth in that little patch, just battling everything and anything. I'm sure I was trying to level up my Blaziken at that time because I didn't get it to 100. I stopped with those rare candies. I know for a fact I was leveling up either the Blaziken or the Groudon, killing those little level 6, level 7 Pokemon, I think they are. Anyways, I was just training there, and I was just wasting time. Now, you'd think I would know what a shiny is, mainly because of the red Gyarados from the Lake of Rage, but I didn't. I didn't really know. Everyone just called it a red Gyarados, so I took it at face value, and I moved on by stuffing it into a box and never using it. But then I saw it. My first shiny that I ran into. It was an orange Poochyena. And when I saw it, I just remember thinking, is it sick? What's wrong with it? Gosh, for that little Poochyena, I threw at least 30 Ultra Balls. That thing did not want to be caught. I mean, it fought tooth and nail not to be caught. So, you know, I got frustrated. I know I did, but, it was just so different looking. I didn't want to just KO it. So I finally got it. And I took it to the Poke Center, thinking that Nurse Joy would say something. After all, she said something for the Pokerus, but she didn't for this, and I was honestly quite confused. I just took it at face value again and deposited that Poochyena, and then I went to Route 101, and I decided then I was going to see if I could find another orange Poochyena. But I didn't find that. Instead, what I found was a gray Wurmple. And I know it's purple now, but it looked gray to me at the time. So, now I have two Pokemon that are different colored. I was really kind of awestruck and dumbstruck, for lack of better terms. So I remember asking my old friends at the time, had they seen anything like this? And none of them had. So that's when I went on the internet, and oh boy, it turns out, yeah, I had my first two shiny Pokemon that way. It was an orange Poochyena and the Wurmple, the purple Wurmple. And boy, talk about a whole new world opening right there. Honestly, I was just like, what color would Blaziken look like? What about Groudon? Are there many different colors? I know in Stadium and Stadium 2, they would have different tints, so it's not the same thing, but could there be different tinted Pokemon even? What about a black Poochyena or a green Wurmple? And it's thanks to the AR that I found out these answers. Most disappointing of all, no, there rarely aren't different colored Pokemon like what I said, different tinted. It's just normal and shiny variant. And while it wasn't a big disappointment, it was just kind of like okay, whatever kind of moment. And so, us using the AR, we started hacking all the shiny Pokemon. That we were curious to see what their sprites look like still. I know for a fact, somewhere in that fake mess of Jirachis from the AR, I do know that there are a shiny Maniana and a shiny Duckstock somewhere. Maybe I'll get them moved up one day. So while that'll do it for Ruby, we still do have one more, and honestly, one of the first pre-order games ever for me. not the first, and that was Pokemon Emerald. I'll remember when we went to Toys R Us on Sunday to get it, or we were going to go rather. I had faked being sick because it being a new Pokemon game, Toys R Us opens at 8, but Mass is also at 8. Well, how about I'm just sick? I can't go to church. I don't want to go to Mass. Oh boy, talk about being smote immediately by the Lord. Yeah, I thought, skip Mass and skip Sunday school. I can get the game much sooner. Well, let me tell you. Because of that, my mom was like, well, you're sick, so no, you can't go. So, because of that, it was also the first pre order I had also lost because that was the last day to get it. $5. That's a lot for a kid back then. And I just remember, I was like, I think I actually am going to be sick. Man, I was just feeling so horrible in multiple ways. Needless to say, I got it that next weekend for my birthday, so, happy birthday to me, because it launched in September. Now with Crystal, I didn't really get the game when it came out. It was more of a pawn buy for me, and I didn't really have an idea of what a third version was, due to Yellow being my first game into the Pokemon series. I also don't really recall much of Crystal, and have I even beaten it? Well, I looked it up. I did look it up. Yes, it turns out I have. Emerald was different, though. I did remember. And it quickly became my go to game for Gen 3. Everything was just better. I couldn't say how, but I did like it more. I used it over Ruby whenever I traded or battled, especially in Pokemon Coliseum and XD. Speaking of Coliseum, I probably rented out that game as much as Kirby Air Ride from the video stores. It's just so much to think about. Yeah, thinking about video game stores there, sorry. Thinking about Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. Just good times. I remember, just a quick tangent. I know I rented out Kirby Air Ride from Hastings so much they told me just buy the game, and they gave it to me for $20. So yeah, that's how I got Kirby Air Ride. Good times. As for XD, I don't really remember where I got it, but I know my brother and we played it so much since he was now starting to get older and he was getting into video games too. He'd watch me. We'd act out the battle animations against each other. We'd laugh. We'd have a great time. That was his formal introduction to Pokemon. It was through me, and it was playing with me. Fat. I'll never forget the final boss from XD, Mr. Greevil. Big shout out to him. He must have been our favorite villain for a good while. Man, we sure did talk about that boss for a while in the boss fight too. He's just, I don't know. They struck gold with him for us at least. There's a game called The Political Machine 2016. I mean, there are different versions now, but I got that one, the 2016 version. And I remember making him a president. That's right. Mr. Greevil was running for president. And his slogan was, I will take your Pokemon. And I don't know how he won, but he did. He won by landslides. So, I just like to imagine America then being deprived of Pokemon because of him. After all, that would be his first act in office. But moving on from that, let's talk about Fire Red and Leaf Green for a little bit. I think this is the time where my brother and I started getting both versions. It wasn't just a gift, it was where we deliberately got both versions. He got Leaf Green, and I had Fire Red. And unfortunately, I don't recall that much. From what I do remember, though, it was the first time I ever saw Blast Burn. And honestly, I thought it was a really cool attack. But I've come around now to just avoiding it altogether. And really, I'd avoid it, Frenzy Plant, and Hydro Cannon too. I just don't like attacks that require a turn to recover from. Hyper Beam. Roar of Time. Any moves that require a recovery time, I'd rather avoid. And I remember thinking, well, I can get a Steelix and I can get a Crobat, so I can use them in my playthrough. And it turned out, no, you can't. My Golbat didn't evolve on purpose. And I just remember being so confused. And it was just like, what the heck? Now, don't get me wrong. Crobat, it isn't a favorite, but I also don't hate it either. It's a middle Pokemon for me. I can take it or leave it. But I do remember I just wanted to use a Crobat. But no, it was locked behind the post game. Yeah. So even back then, I was thinking about how Johto, in Johto, I could get a Crobat no problems. Once I figured out how friendship worked, at least. And then also locked away were event items in Pokemon. And it's just around this time, Mystery Gift was really starting to come around. And the mystery gifts were only in a select few cities in America: New York, St. Louis. And this was the time when I was checking Pokemon.com almost every day. It was my go-to site for information. And every time a mystery event came around, I'm sure I asked my parents if we could go to New York City or St. Louis, not understanding how far distance is or how travel really works. But gosh, I just remember that sucked. As a kid in West Texas, where the closest urban centers are Dallas and El Paso and San Antonio, we're kind of in between them all. We're becoming an urban center now, but it sucked. That there's no two ways about it. It sucked. I don't even know if Houston had any. And it was just because of my geography, I remember feeling kind of not neglected, but well, yeah, I guess you could say neglected, but it was where some seed of hatred, I guess, started growing. Resentment is the correct term, not hatred, resentment. And even though mystery events would become better later on, and I'll talk about that, it was hard. It was hard to imagine. And I'll tell you why that's hard to imagine, because the one and only event I did get to attend, it was a Mew distribution event at Toys R Us. One of my old friends and we went there because his mom had heard about it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll take you there." I just remember thinking, along with the rest of my friend group at that time, if they could have done this for Mew, why weren't they doing it for the other events? It was honestly kind of embittering, and it was just annoying. So, to this day, I really don't understand why they did this. It was a seed of resentment, but a seed of resentment nonetheless. So, anyways, let's move on to Gen 4, my brother's generation. Gen 4. Gen 4, Gen 4, Gen 4. My brother's generation. Honestly, before I get into it, I need to do a little bit of a preface with this. I know Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue are considered to be part of Gen 3, but I had Blue on the DS, so I consider it part of Gen 4. Now, the hype leading up to Gen 4, with every small leak or detail we got, good grief, we would we would go insane. Playing with Bonsai, well, it wasn't. It was bad. It was bad. I'll be honest. But it was exciting. I finally got to play with it in XD when I got the lotto card for it. So, even though it sucked, I was excited. I was playing the Gen 4 Pokemon in a Gen 3 game. What? It's just crazy. And then getting that Lucario statue in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, that was the big goal of me for that game. It was to get that Lucario statue. Boy, they were hyping up Lucario all over the place. And honestly, I remember thinking, will it join me on my team in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon if I get it? If I get its statue? He was pretty cool in movie what? 8? Oh, jeez. Jeez. Honestly, I thought he was from the fourth movie when I was writing this, but yeah, turns out no, there were a slew of movies in Hoenn, aside from 8, Pokemon movie 8. Honestly, I think Hoenn has to be the generation with the most movies. That is, if we don't include the mirrored Victini movies as 2 different movies. Anyways, let's get back to the hype. Yeah, let's get into that hype. Just kidding. Honestly, this was the generation where the hype truly started to take form into what we know now and love or hate. Gosh, when it comes to the new generations, hype is it's a big deal. And honestly, this is where that generation app really made it form, where it started to take its form. It's what I'm trying to say. My gosh, sorry. Honestly, there was nothing better than the hype. We were all just trying to figure out, what Pokemon have, what evolutions, and what they could look like. Gosh, all the Fakemon. Honestly, some of them looked really cool. It's just crazy. Some of the Fakemon. I'll never forget that summer before it came out. We had an uncle, his wife, and cousins coming over from Alabama, and we knew we couldn't just look at Cerebi every day while they were over here. So we finally looked at it the final time, and the final time it showed, I think it was Weavile. I can't really place when it was, when they visited, but a new Pokemon was shown, and I know my brother and I were absolutely hyped for it then. I know we speculated the next few hours of that night. Oh gosh, just memories, good memories. I know we finally got to sleep, but we sure did speculate. And so pre-ordering time came, and very quickly we got it. I would get Diamond, and he would get Pearl. It would take a while for him to get Pearl, but do know we did pre-order both. And so, the wait time was also starting to form here too. That was starting to take shape. I'm sure it was a very long summer for me. But honestly, I don't remember because I was playing with my chows in Sonic Adventure 2. And that was honestly one of the best summers, just playing with our chows together, with one of my friends, with one of my old friends. And boy, we raised the heck out of the chow. We played with the chow. And Animal Crossing Wild World, we got that, and we started playing the heck out of that too. Gosh, it was a fun summer. I just remember that. So summer comes and goes, and here comes November. And I know I must have been the first there because it was dead. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, it was kind of weird. It was smooth. It was so smooth. Nowadays I'm not afraid to talk to to get my pre-order. I'm not like, I mean, I guess I am if I fumble my words. But back then, as a kid, oh, I was so scared of talking to even cashiers. I was shy, and so even though there was nobody, it was hard for me to get my pre-order because I was just shy. Anyways, so with that, I get my pre-ordered game, and a brand new world began. While everyone was thinking about Church Week or Chimtar, especially in my friend group, I chose Pebble. It's just cutest, and it was a penguin. And honestly, why have a turtle or a monkey when you can have a penguin? you know, Not only that, but a penguin that dresses well when it fully evolves. Honestly, to this day, Piplup 100% choice for my Gen 4 runs. It's just I've always chosen it, and I don't think it'll change. I just like Piplup. It's one of my favorite. It's just for me, it's a ride or die. And so I've got to say, because my brother didn't get the pre-order until he had his own DS, so I held on to the game. For a very long time, we were very pro Dialga too, over Palkia. And I don't remember what it was about Palkia that we didn't like, but we just didn't like it. Maybe it was because it was pink and I was barely a teen. So, you're getting into that phase, well, back then, of, it's all boy, it's gotta be all blue, no pink. But, anyways, not like that stayed with my brother because, yeah, he got Palkia, and oh boy, I became so jealous of him. After all, Spatial Rend hits every turn, but Roar of Time is basically a dragon type Hyper Beam. And so, yeah. When we started fighting, anytime he had Palkia, it's just such a slog. But that wouldn't last though, because I got Darkrai. And oh boy, yeah, it's time to talk about mystery gifts again. I guess they learned from their mistakes in Gen 3 because they started releasing events online and at GameStop here in the US. So, anyways, let me tell you about Darkrai. At least my Darkrai. I got the key. I went to the house. I battled it. I caught it. And I then proceeded to work around its ability Bad Dreams. And I believe it does an eighth of a total damage whenever a Pokemon's asleep every turn. So, with that being said, my Darkrai, to this day, the Darkrai is still in Diamond. It knows Dark Void, Nightmare, Dream Eater, and Pursuit. And honestly, I was so effective and annoying with that. My friends banned me from using it. They, well, they would start protesting. They would start leaving matches anytime I tried to use it. And honestly, it's just I got just that one Pokemon. It overpowered me so much and made me too annoying. But I can understand why they banned me from using it. Anyways, I'd also like to say I don't know why, but I've never seen a Nightmare set on Darkrai. Like the move set that I just listed, I've never seen that for some reason. And I think it's one of the best move sets I've ever seen on a Pokemon that nobody uses. But leave that for the competitive people, not for me. A casual Pokemon fan, after all. But I just want to talk about how I utilized that strategy. You'd use Dark Void, you'd put the Pokemon to sleep, you'd follow up with Nightmare, and all of a sudden they realize what kind of situation they're in. Because with Nightmare and Bad Dreams, you're taking probably a quarter damage each turn then. And then, just in case they tried to run, I'd use Pursuit. And it almost always worked. Add a Quick Claw to that, and gosh, yeah, it sure was a nightmare for my friends. But puns aside, I wonder if it could be brought into Paldea. So I looked it up, and no, turns out Nightmare does not exist in Gens 8 or 9. We will talk about this issue later. Anyways, let's get back to battling. So my friends would come over every few weeks, and at that time we were going to each other's house almost every weekend. We would rotate. And we'd have a blast battling against each other. Especially when I brought my Wii and I had Pokemon Battle Revolution when that came out. Gosh, those battles were so beautiful. And the music, oh my gosh. Oh, the music was just amazing. It's just like Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. The attacks felt like they had weight behind it, for the most part. Feigning was vibrant. The game was just perfect for a competitive, casual, or actual. And I even like it's such a small feature that this game does. But depending on the type attack that you do, you can see that on the HP bar in PBR. An ice attack will have little ice shards that take away at the HP. Water type attacks will have water effects take away. It was small and little effects like that made PBR one of the best battle games of the series. At least when it comes to just battling. Let's go on a little bit of a tangent again. But Coliseum and XD, honestly, they fall into their own special place in my little Pokemon heart. They're just their own games by their own merits. As far as I'm concerned, they're a mainline game. You can trade with them. You can catch wild Pokemon, at least in XD, but you can catch Pokemon. And as far as I'm concerned, even to this day, you can get a Pokemon up from Coliseum. Well, you could get a Pokemon up from Pokemon Coliseum all the way to Paldea, but that's another issue we'll talk about later. And gosh, those games were just great battles, and yeah, they could last a bit long. But as a desert dweller myself, I just really appreciate desert games, and I liked it. There could be some more desert variety, but we're talking about Gen 4 still, so let's talk about Platinum. Oh boy. The big daddy, I guess you could call it. This game, well, it's not the holy grail for me, but it is second for me. Much to the chagrin of my brother at that time. Whereas Soul Silver is my game, Platinum, it's his game. It was so fun watching him understand those mechanics and learn about the mechanics and just fight. He would always be wanting to try some new strategy, and I would be his grindstone. I was his whetstone, where he would hone himself battle wise. He'd win some, I'd win a lot, but I could tell he was just getting better every time we battled, just a little bit better, understanding the mechanics just a little bit more. And honestly, to this day, I think he understands the battle mechanics more than I do. Just because you win, you don't learn as much. But you lose, you learn a lot, I feel. And so that's why I think he understands way more than I do. And honestly, gosh, yeah, Platinum was where he really started his Pokemon journey. It's kind of like me, where I had Yellow, but I didn't really start understanding until Silver. It was like him. Yeah, he had Leaf Green, but he didn't start understanding until Platinum. So, speaking of starting, that's also where I finally got an AR myself. And, oh gosh, it was a grand cheating spree for me and my old friends at that time. We'd battle with Pokemon we'd cheat in, seeing how ridiculous we'd get. We'd level our Pokemon up to level 100 real quick. Gosh, so many good memories there. And one of those memories, actually, I'll tell you two. One of them, I had a team of baby Pokemon, but they all knew signature moves. And, gosh, that was just so crazy. I had like a Cleffa that knew Roar of Time, and Spatial Rin, and I think an Igglybuff that knew Judgment. Oh gosh, it was just crazy what I came up with when I finally figured out how to start cheating moves with AR onto Pokemon. And gosh, I know my friends were just cracking up laughing at that team because, yeah, it was like so easy to defeat them, but gosh, it's just a Cleffa using Spatial Rend or an Igglybuff using Roar. It was so ridiculous. I think I came out on top for that one for a little bit. And then another chaotic team that I am absolutely proud of, 100% to this day still, is my team of 18 Shaman that knew the best moves for each type. So what I did was I gave it the corresponding plate type, and then I looked up all the moves. So, the Grass Shaman, it knew Sea Flare, of course, but then I think it knew Power Vine, I think it's called. I can't remember. Oh gosh, we're talking Gen 4 moves here, so good grief, I can't remember, but needless to say, 18 Shaman, 18 types, it knew all the types. Remember, Fairy wasn't around at this time, so it was all the types that were represented then. And honestly, it was through that I learned quite a bit of moves like Magma Storm and Gunk Shot. Rockcracker was another move that I learned about. For some reason, we battled, but we just never trained. Traded, I mean. Now I have to say, with cheating and hacking, Yeah, it was all fun. It was all literally all fun and games. But in all seriousness, it was also how we learned out about the Azure Flute. Gosh, none of us really knew what it was, nor did we ever see an event for it. So it was just kind of like a wait and see at that time. And then I just remember us thinking, was it too powerful to be released? Was there something wrong with it? Was this like the Gen 4 version of a bad egg or something? So, it was just kind of like we sat on it to see what would happen and what would come. And nothing came from Pokemon.com, from Celebi. So we had no idea what this was. Well, gosh, I know one of us figured it out organically. Who figured it out? I don't know. But it was also around the same time that, yeah, websites were posting, hey, this is what the Azure Flute does. So did they see it from the website, or were they lying and they looked on the website? I don't know. I'd like to believe they figured it out organically, because back then we would just keep going through and through and through and through the regions over and over and over again with different teams. It's what we did. Gosh, no event ever came from this. So it's just kind of curious. And then we found God, the Pokemon one at least. Gosh, yeah, that was the first Pokemon we ever found through a cheating device. And yeah, we could have cheated Arceus into the game like normal, but yeah, it's just, gosh, event Pokemon just giving away level 100 Arceus? Nah, move over. We already have our own. So, yeah, it's just like, what do we call, what's the plural of Arceus? We were trying to figure that one out. Arceus's? RCI? Arce people? Anyways, needless to say, we got the Arceus. We still got that Arceus when it came out. But anyways, let's move forward just a little bit, just a tiny bit, and we'll talk about Soul Silver now. So while my brother and I were having fun with Platinum, and he was catching his Giratina surprisingly easy, and to this day he still laughs at me. Gosh, he laughs and laughs at me while I was just struggling so hard with it. Honestly, probably spent 2 hours just trying to catch the dang thing. But anyways, some time had passed, and I saw in Silverby that Gen 2 was getting a remake. To be over the moon was probably a little too subtle how I felt. Even back then, I was starting to feel nostalgia for Gen 2. I wasn't even 20 yet, and I was already feeling nostalgic. I was fondly recalling memories for Silver. Gosh, just thinking about it. Sorry, I'm so sorry reading this and just speaking. Gosh, some just good memories. And now that my brother, was of age where he could remember and actually play, I was I was looking forward to this. I was really looking forward to this. So we went to GameStop and one of in the mall here, and we pre-ordered it. And now I'm on a journey to get the different games in each store of my town. I guess, I don't know. First Circuit City, Toys R Us, now GameStop. What's next? We'll find out. Anyway, like Platinum, my brother and I began concurrently then too. And we'd battle every few days just to see how strong we were. At this point, I was still big into battling with my friends and with my brother. So even though my brother would challenge me, I would oftentimes go to him and challenge him as well. So just understand that relationship. It was a back and forth that way. And gosh, it was just an absolute joy seeing Johto and being back in it. And to this day, it has to be my favorite Pokemon game. Hands down. It just has to be. There's a reason why these two are beloved so much, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And honestly, I feel the mystique in game and the history with Johto has to be part of that appeal. It just feels like a slower region. It's one where life is more relaxed. There's not really the hustle and bustle of a big city, especially as we'd come to see in Gen 5. Even Goldenrod, it doesn't really feel like a big city. It feels more like a big town. And honestly, it's my number one pick for a region I would live if I could. Now, of course, this being all aside from the amazing mechanics and the work they did to make this already master of a game a remake. Gosh, it's just these current games wish they could be Soul Silver and Heart Gold. Real quick, my second region I'd live in would be Paldea, but I'll get into that way later. And although we're spending time in Johto, it's coming to an end again, and it's honestly time to move to the next generation now. A generation that would be released when I first entered high school, and that's Gen 5. Now, with Gen 5, I'm sure I was part of the hype with it, and I'm sure I was watching Celebi like a hawk. But honestly, I can't really recall any of this. I was going through quite a big change at that time with entering high school, but nevertheless, I know I put $10 down. I went to a different GameStop to pre-order for my brother and I. And I know we got them and immediately went ham on them. To this day, those sprites, they were just, oh wow. Oh wow. The Pokemon moving in battle, the dynamic camera moving, it was just flawless. Absolutely flawless. And honestly, my brother and I remember we would go back and forth to each other, and we would show new Pokemon to each other, and we would just watch those animations, especially with the version exclusives. Here's another hill I'm willing to die on. To this day, the fighting system of Gen 5 has been the best, at least when it comes to regarding the sprites. I know a lot of people say this, and I want to give them praise for making the Pokemon feel so alive and so real. So, with my choice of this generation, I chose Oshawott. And so now we're up to 2 fire and 2 water types. Sorry, grass types. Don't forget, I also had yellow in Gen 1, so, that's why it's only 4. So, this naturally puts me at a disadvantage with my brother, who chose Snivy. That's okay. That's fine. I think by this time it was roughly 50-50 with wins and losses against my brother. Gosh, we were still grinding. He was still grinding against... Gosh, that sounds horrible. He was learning from Pokemon battles against me. And it was clearly showing by now. So while my brother and I were having fun with Pokemon, I need to mention that my old friends, we played Gen 4. We had ridiculous fun. They started dropping off. One fell off with Gen 4, and another fell off with Gen 5. And when I asked them why they fell off, they honestly said it just wasn't for them anymore, or they had moved on to different games. Now, hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. But back then, I didn't understand. As a teen best friend normally does, you try to get them back in. You try to pull them back in. What's wrong with it? Anyways, it was just, I couldn't get them back in. And it was sad for me. It was hard. It connected me with those friends. And as I would soon learn, it's okay to let go and still be friends through other means. It was a time that Pokemon was seen as childish, and it's something I didn't really agree with, and I still don't agree with. I think now it's become more accepted, but back then, in 2010, it was really seen as something childish. And they thought so, and they let go. And honestly, it makes me wonder, this happened with me and some of my friends. How many friendships have ended or changed because one of those people let Pokemon go? When that was the reason they also connected in the first place. Has that happened to y'all? I'm just curious that way. Either way, I continued on with them for a few more years before graduating, along with other old friends of mine that still played Pokemon. They would come over and they would watch, but it was spectating then. It was more for that. Unlike Gen 4, though, we didn't really fight as much in Gen 5. I'm not too sure why that was. Maybe it was because we were all entering high school. We just didn't have time. Maybe it was because they just didn't really want to fight. They just wanted to hang out and talk about different things. Who's to say? So graduation quickly came upon us as the years progressed. And I'm sure not having a dedicated battle game like Gen 4 did with Battle Revolution, that probably didn't help with the battling. I need to add, as I look at these dates of when these games came out, it really guides me into realizing what exactly was going on, at least in my lifetime. It really shows, I don't know, the years to me. Uh, is it strange to use Pokemon has a ruler for years? I don't know. Do y'all do that? But at the same time, these games, they really exist in their own bubble. And they're like, yeah, I know the rough, going back, I know the rough time period, but it's like these memories are separate from the memories of what's going on then. The only reason I know why they're connected is because of the year. Like I said, I remember the years that way. I don't know, so strange. Really strange. Psychologists, y'all have fun with that. Anyways, Black and White 2, yeah, that came out. And that was actually released just right after I left high school, right after I graduated. So I don't remember much of that either. Surprise, surprise. I was getting ready for college at that point. Even at that point, it was just another game to me. And it was another game to beat. And yeah, I think that was the first time I felt that way with Pokemon games. I know my brother and I battled a few times, but it wasn't that much either. And that was mainly due to me attending community college at that time, entering into my first real year of college. I know we beat the game. There's no doubt about that. But because of life matters, I just can't recall much of the game. And that's fine. That's part of growing up. Two memories I do have, though, was that he and I would fight over NPCs for Black and White City and both games. While that petered out in Black and White 2, we still did it nonetheless. And while I had such a hard time catching Giratina in Gen 4, he had such a hard time against Champion Iris, while I had no trouble. And I honestly laughed at him. It was retribution, in my opinion. But that revenge train was not finished. We'll see how that revenge train comes back. Anyways, I also think it was him who also found Landorus. It wasn't me. It was him. That was his first legendary he found without me. Yeah, I'll never forget him showing Landorus. And I was just like, where'd you find this? And he told me where, and he's like, good for you. He was coming into his own. And so that was a really proud moment, So now let's move on to Gen 6. But real quick, I just have to say, really, really, really don't like Kyurem and how it absorbs Reshiram and Zekrom. Nope. I don't know what it is with Japanese and that kind of absorption stuff, is this where Vor comes from? Because honestly, it's like him and Cell, hell no. Just no, no, no. Burn in hell. Burn in hell for all I care. I don't like it. Anyways, with Gen 6, now we're entering when I was getting into leaving my hometown and really getting into me living on my own and attending university elsewhere. Gens. Well, that ended poorly, didn't it? Trying to speak French, and I can't even remember what 6 is in French. Gen 6. As above, see below. Hype train. Sure, I was a part of it. Don't remember much. Pre-purchased X and Y. Got it from GameStop. The drill. We got it down. We got it pat. All right. I do recall, though, that they were pushing the 3D aspect of the game really hard. And they were really, 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 really pushing Mega Evolutions. And also Fairy Type. Can't forget the Fairy Type. And so one of my old friends who was still playing, because now we're just down to me and one other guy. And so at that time, we speculated, what was a Mega Evolution? It's obviously a fourth, but what makes it special? Would all evolutions have them? Do we need something special for it? And yeah, as we learned, we don't need to do anything other than just having the Mega Bracelet and the Mega Stone. We were kind of disappointed not having a fourth evolution. But hey, whatever. It didn't really matter because, yeah, as we came into battling, the few times we battled, gosh, we used Mega so much. So, yeah, this is also kind of where the gimmicks, I guess you could say, for the Pokemon start coming in. We had Shadow Pokemon before, but now here we have one that's going to stick and going to stay with Megas, at least for the time being. So, who did I choose for the starter? I chose Finnegan. Yeah, that's right. I'm a mage and I'm a healer for life. And also a bard, if possible. So, with this generation, naturally, I don't recall much. But, I was going to university and I was going to Mexico quite a bit to see my ex. So, yeah, I think between the sleep deprivation and being in a first serious relationship, Pokemon, for the first time, took a backseat. From what I do recall, I do remember trading for the Vivillon, but I'll talk about what happened to my first cartridge shortly. It was also the first generation where I actively decided to skip on Mega, or not Mega, Mystery Gift Pokemon and Event Pokemon. I think maybe I got 2 Event Pokemon from them. I don't recall. I know for a fact I don't have a Volcanion, I don't have a Hoopa, and I don't have a Deontay. I do have Hoopa on Pokemon Go, but we'll talk about Pokemon Go later. Honestly, it was just at that point, I was getting sick of it. Why have all these mythical Pokemon, as they would soon be called, just being handed to us? Why? Why? I don't like it, to be honest. You're getting handed a Pokemon that you just can't really even use. Most of them are probably banned in competition still. So, what are you doing with it? It's already level 100. It's just to look at. And I mean, I guess you could battle your friends with it, but it's just, I don't like it. The Mews were different when they came from Toys R Us. I think they were level 20 or level 5 even. I can't remember the levels. But you could level them up and you can actually trade them to someone who was just starting the game. Hey, you want a Mew? Sure. If you had like 20 Mew or whatever, because at that event you could get as many Mew as you wanted. I forgot to mention that. You could, if you wanted a whole box full of Mew, you could trade a whole box full of Mew. That's how packed these cartridges were. There was no limit to getting the Mew. Whereas with Mystery Gift now, you're seeing it like you do now. You get a level 100 mythical. It's probably going to be banned pretty quickly. Have fun. Have fun looking at. So yeah, mythical Pokemon given like that. I don't I don't like it. And yes, I am complaining about it. Honestly, I wish they would do what they did with Arceus when you would take Arceus to the Sinjo ruins in Soul Silver and Heart Gold. Cynthia would come up to you and say, hey, you got an Arceus, come here. And she'll take you to this platform. Arceus will make you an egg of Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina, whichever you want. They're legitimate. Legitimate level 1 Pokemon from an legendary Pokemon from an egg. They need to do it like that. Have it in an egg, have it level 1, have it level 5, whatever. I would just like to have a mythical Pokemon that I can raise. Thank you. Anyways, complaining aside, I honestly think people would enjoy this more. This is honestly a big deal for me. It's an issue I have. I'm still complaining. I'm sorry. I have to say, Deontay was the exception to this rule at the time. They handed it out with you to be on your starting journey in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But I still skipped on it when the games came out. I actively pre-ordered those games, but I didn't get it. I didn't want it. And honestly, to this day, I have a hard time remembering those Pokemon. Aside from Hoopa. Because honestly, that movie, Hoopa's movie, is just one of my favorite. Just because of the antics and the chaos it brings. Never change, Hoopa. Never change. Let's go back to when I was talking about with my friend. At first, it was just one of my friends. But then Another friend, he got a girlfriend and she played Pokemon. It was fun when we did battle a few times, but it was just a few times. I could probably count on one hand how many times we both battled, or I battled both of those friends. Honestly, it probably has to do with me moving away, because after that, they stopped talking to me. But, with that door being closed and all of the old friends that I had played Pokemon with, they were gone. Yeah, I'm sure that affects me even to this day. I'm sure it does. And even now, with me dwelling on it, I have to control myself. I dwell a lot. Even now, reading this, I'm dwelling. I need to stop that. But as they say, one door closes, another opens, and so yeah, another one sure did open, and oh boy, Mexico did not disappoint that way. When we could, my ex and I would play together, but with my game being in English, it didn't really help. It helped with learning and how to translate, and we did have fun, but there was that language barrier there, and especially because I was still learning Spanish at that time. I'm talking baby level Spanish, 2-year old still. Me learning Spanish. Don't ask. It worked. It did. It just did. That was the first time I had something to share Pokemon with, and that was a partner. And oddly enough, it made a lot of early friends this way in Mexico for me as well. It was alive and well in Mexico. Who would have figured? Honestly, I found new life that way with Pokemon. It was because of that I had rebought a 3DS and Y again to play with those friends. I had fallen on some hard times shortly after I moved, and not wanting to ask my parents for money, the only thing I could think of was to sell my games of Soul Silver, Y, and the original 3DS. To this day, I know I haven't beaten that second game of Y. It says here I don't think I've beaten the game of Y. I'll have to check. And no, I haven't. I'm at the Pokeball factory. Regardless of beating it or not, I sure did have fun playing it with my ex and those friends. Gosh, it was just amazing. Even then, Pokemon was making new friendships for me. It was helping me make new friendships. So let's move forward a little bit and talk about the release of Auras, since I had already touched on it. My brother and I got the pre-orders of the copies, as usual, but since I was away from home, we were playing on our own again. And along with playing alone this time, it was actually the first time I had ever played a Pokemon game alone. Those friends from Mexico, they didn't get the game. And before I knew it, I was in another crowd with my second ex. It was a crowd that didn't play Pokemon. They had heard of Pokemon, yeah, but as far as it went, that was it. They had just heard of it. It wasn't childish or anything. It was just something that they didn't want to spend money on. They felt money was more valuable for other things, and I certainly understand that. Don't get me wrong. I certainly understand that. But yeah, I played alone, and I completed the Pokedex alone with the help of GTS for the first time. That was how Oris went. It wasn't particularly special. It was kind of a downer, to be honest, because it was my first game alone. But with that being said, let's move on to Gen 7. I know the hype was still around when Gen 7 was announced, but my brother and I, we were really preoccupied with grieving for the sudden loss of our grandpa. That was just something I think we missed entirely. We did pre-purchase the game, or the games, and we went to the midnight release for it. I think that was one of the times his friends was there. If it wasn't for that, it was for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Regardless, there were just a lot of people waiting for us, or not waiting for us, but waiting with us for the game to be released. It was actually the first time we ever went to a midnight release. I think it was also the first time Pokemon had done a midnight release. I could be wrong. I'm not too sure. At least for us, it was the first time. Regardless, when we got the game, we got to playing as usual. And for my starter, I chose Poplio. Now, you'd think with 2016 being barely 7 years out, I'd remember more, but unfortunately, I don't. I don't know. I guess this is just how time works. However, it was around this time that I noticed that my brother was even starting to waver. He had his ups and downs, and it was honestly a low for me too. The graphics weren't really an issue. I liked the jump to 3D, but I can just tell you point blank, it just, gosh, those days where the Pokemon seemed alive, like in Gen 5, they were long gone. Attacks just didn't feel like they hit the same anymore either. I remember when I used Solgaleo's signature move, Sun Steel Strike, it just didn't feel like it hit hard. It was the first time I had seen the signature move, and I was just kind of like, oh, okay. Just, it was underwhelming to me. I mean, it looked cool, but I didn't feel like it hit hard. And honestly, even attacks from Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, like Sky Attack, they look more appropriate and look like they'd hit harder, to be honest. If you haven't seen those, they look incredible even back then for Sky Attack. And honestly, that's kind of what I imagined they were going for with Sunsteel Strike. It was also around this time that I started having pushback against anything Kanto. Gosh, it had been long brewing within me, but this was the generation where it really came to light. It even came out in talks with me and my brother whenever we would talk. Anything Kanto in the games, I had resentment. I was just tired of Kanto. The Nugget Bridge and the Vermilion City Gym imitation, they had to have been painful at that time for me. I remember being happy to see the gym, but I didn't really care about it. At that time, I really didn't even care about the trials either. I've come around to them, but no, back then that it was just kind of, yeah, I could take it or leave it. Gosh, yeah, the kickback to Kanto was still there, even though I was happy with the gym, but I was just like, really? When Red and Blue showed up at the battle tree, all I could just remember was, I just want to get this over with. It didn't feel like the reunion they had intended. And remember, at this point, most of the Megas were Kanto. So were the regional forms now, with the introduction in Alola of the regional form Pokemon. And it just really irked me that some Pokemon were considered rare in regions, and yet most of the new regional mechanics like Megas and regional variants, they were all Kantoan. It talks about Pikachu being rare, and yet it's like he's everywhere. you know, Now I realize he's the mascot, but it's just one of those things that it was one of those things that was getting to me at the time. And in fact, looking at a list of regional Pokemon for Alola, there are no regional Pokemon outside of Kanto. Even island forms, only Oricorio has island form. Executor has a point to be made, but it debuted in Kanto. So to me, even though Executor's from Alola, I consider it to be from Kanto just as much. Not only this, but now we had visited Kanto 3 times outside of its generation. You had Gen 2 with GSC, Fire Red and Leaf Green in Generation 3, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver with Generation 4. I'm sure Pokemon was using Kanto and Kantoan Pokemon as nostalgia bait. For me, it just ended up angering me to the point that I had disdain for Kanto. And even to this day, I have Kanto and pushback. It just got way too much attention. And honestly, why can't us Johto players have some attention? Anyways, the only exception was Pokemon Go. I'll talk about Pokemon Go. I want to stick real quick with or I want to stick with Gen 7. At that time, the game Pokemon in general was meant to bring people together. That's what it started out as, and I'm glad it has, but unfortunately for me, Gen 7 was just a very lonely game. My second ex would watch every now and then, but he just didn't really care for it. Yeah, we started playing Pokemon Go sporadically at that point. I'll talk more about that later. Let's focus on mystery events. I know there was Magearna, and I did get that one, only to find out it was level 100 again. Honestly, what's the point of mystery gift Pokemon? It feels cheapening with all these mythicals being locked behind mystery gift and then them being automatically banned and not even be able to raise it. I got Marshadow too. I was thinking I could raise it. I turned out to be the fool. This event I remember well too because I got the Pokemon, I used the signature move, and then I used Marshadow's signature move with the Z Crystal, and I put it back in the box. And that's where it is to this day. Gosh, that was just when mystery gift Pokemon to me was pretty much done. What was the third one? Oh yeah, Zeraora. I did not like it at all, and to this day I'm still mixed on it. I know they were going for like a cool aesthetic with it, but to me it's just not cool. If I have one, it's in the box as well. I probably have never used it. And I don't think that's what they're aiming for with Mystery Gift. If it is, then well done. While we're on Mystery Gift, I didn't really like the appreciation of special Z crystals they gave away either. In fact, it was just ingratiating Kantoan Pokemon even more. And who can forget the daddy of all, the Ash Hat Pikachu ones? Oh my gosh. You can't even trade those up. They're literally stuck in the game, in those games. Honestly, they had that event going on for a few months where you could get a different Pikachu wearing a different Ash hat. And that was it. And honestly, to me, it's as bad as the spiky eared Pichu event. I remember being so happy I got it, because I had the shiny Pichu. I knew I could level that up and get a shiny Raichu eventually, which Raichu is one of my favorite Pokemon, by the way. When I found out you can't get a spiky-eared Pikachu or even a spiky-eared Raichu, that's where it started getting tarnished for me, mystery gifts. And I feel like it's a big tarnish on Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I feel like it brings it down. It's a double strike in my book. I like Raichu over Pikachu more. Yeah, Lieutenant Surge's Raichu was a jerk, but I think Raichu are nice overall. So, with that being said, let's move on to the next games, which came out a year later. Just 1 year. It wasn't even 2 years, it was 1 year with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Was there hype for the game? For me, not really. I mean, I was excited to play a new Pokemon game, don't get me wrong, but Sun and Moon had left me lacking and angry. It was the first time a Pokemon game had left me feeling like that. I was hoping for Ultra Sun and Moon to fix that. We've seen third games introduce new forms of Pokemon in both Platinum and Black and White 2. Black 2 and White 2, sorry. So I was hoping for some variation, like that. It was the same. In fact, I only think Nezcroma gets new forms. 4 new forms, actually. 3 of which are for Nezcroma, and 1 is for Lycanroc, which is the amazing looking Dusk form. It's honestly one of the best forms, I think. But honestly, that was it. Just a side note, I hope, there's a Dusk form now. There'll be a Dawn form. That'd look pretty cool, You could take some night influences and mix it more with the day influences to get a form set. Then you have morning, night, dusk, and dawn. That'd be pretty cool. As a side note as well, I'd just like to say that the Ultra Necrozma fight, oh my gosh. That demolished would be an understatement. It melted me as a player. I did not expect such a difficulty spike. And all of a sudden, I was locked into fighting the fight of my Pokemon life against a legendary. Not only that, an ultra legendary, I feel. My brother had it easy, and he likes to point that out. So, yeah, the revenge train had come back for me. But I say good day, sir, as we move on. I have no doubt as I played the game, I was starting to lose hope for Pokemon, and I was becoming fearful for the franchise as well. Long gone were the days where my brother and I even fought. I think we just traded a few times. We still lived together, but I don't think we ever fought. And anytime we traded, it was just, one Pokemon. It wasn't like before. We would talk about Pokemon. We traded the version exclusives, but that was it. Honestly, we traded just so I could finish the Pokedex. I don't know if he finished it or not. To me, that was my goal. Competitions, even back then, weren't really interesting to me. And I felt like getting all the forms of the Pokemon, like Minior and Oricorio especially. Honestly, that's what appealed to me more was collecting the different forms, just making a living dex, so to speak, even back then. I do need to note that although Dexit started with Sword and Shield, Pokemon had already pulled a fast one over us. Dexit had already started to hit in like a soft form with both Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon. They had already removed Pokedex entries for the National Dex. This is the generation it started. So while you could get all the Pokemon, it didn't have Pokedex entries for all of them, only a certain few. So this is where I consider Dexit really to start, at least in a soft form, like I said. It's something I honestly don't hear people mention. I don't know if it's well known or not, but it did start here. And I think mainly because people didn't talk about it, it gave them the green light for cutting the Pokedex altogether. I just remember being so confused and honestly upset. And even then I thought, why have these Pokemon if they weren't going to give them a Pokedex entry? Well, little did I know what was coming up in Generation 8. Gen 8. The year's in 2019, and Sword and Shield are coming out soon. But that's not before Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee came out. I think this is the first game of Pokemon I truly had mixed feelings for. I didn't really like Sun and Moon, but I wanted to play it. I was looking forward to it, even though I wasn't part of the hype. But these two right here, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, my Kanto and pushback was just so alive at that time. It was dying down as I was working through my feelings to just make peace that Kanto is just gonna be around. It's just gonna be the golden standard when it comes to getting the love for original mechanics and remakes when it comes to Pokemon. It was the third remake of Kanto, but with the twist of Pokemon Go, which it sort of helped because it was a new mechanic. I honestly didn't know how it would work out. At that time, yeah, I was still learning the ropes for Pokemon Go, mainly because I was putting it up, putting back down, putting it up, putting back down. Plus, I didn't really know how we could throw Pokeballs. I was thinking at that time, would it just be like a Safari Zone game? I was thinking it was going to be more akin to that. And it wasn't long until I found out how the catching mechanics work. To this day, I honestly wish they just didn't with those mechanics. I didn't get the Pokeball with the Munit. After all, I had a ton of Mew built up from previous generations. And looking back on it, it was. I have it here as average enjoyment, but to be honest, it was forgettable. Honestly, everything looked great and sounded nice. The soundtrack has to be the nicest thing that came out of it. So, yeah, just know that if you have to take anything away from this, I'm never going to complain about the music. It's some of the best music out there. Whoever their music department is, kudos. Kudos to them for being on point every single game. But getting back to the gameplay, we have the problem of moves not feeling like they're hitting hard again. I can't get a Steelix again. To this day, it's the only mainline Pokemon game that I've actively put down, and I have not completed it. I think I'm barely at Giovanni's first fight in in Celadon City. I'm probably there or just beat it, but I just, I couldn't. I just couldn't. Not having natures is fine, but not going back to having held items even. Why cherry pick from Johto even? I understand it was a merger between Pokemon Go and the mainline games, but if they want the kids to know about mainline Pokemon, they need to know that Pokemon have natures, and more importantly, that Pokemon can hold items. Honestly, at this point, and even now when I think about it, Kanto's like that focus sash that Magnemite uses the move recycle on over and over again. It's because of this game that I have a disdain for Kanto. It was dying, but boy, Kanto and Pushback really came alive back then. They could have remade Johto. They could have remade Hoenn for the 3D on the Switch like that. But they didn't. And I am honestly glad they did because, gosh, with the height of corporatization hitting Pokemon so hard, so too was Galar in Sword and Shield. It was coming out right about then. Now, I will say, and I will leave this and has a link. Radical Soda, his video is just amazing over Sword and Shield. So I recommend you just go listen to him and you just enjoy his 100% primo world class ranting because it's one of my favorite videos. It covers a lot of things that I feel as well. As for my reaction and experience, though, I know the hype was there, but it was honestly sullied by the whole Dexit issue. At that time, my brother and I had a long winded discussion, actually, multiple. He didn't particularly care. He was fine with Dexit happening, while I was not. Either case, we got the game digital since we didn't want to get out at midnight. When it came out, I know it was met with trepidation. The story was just awful. There's no way around it. While I did really appreciate the Phantom fight when you get to the Wooloo that's gone into the Slumbering Weald, the animations and the Pokemon though, it was just it makes me wonder if they were to turn this in for a final in college, what would their grade be? Would it be a D even, or would it be worse? Anyways, the animations, I know they've been thoroughly discussed, and I don't want to focus on that. What I do want to focus on is Dexit. Why would they cut the Pokemon? As someone who's never been into competitive, completing the full Pokedex, that was my objective for the games. It might have gone tiring, yes, but I had fun trading Pokemon and exploring it to the fullest. That's what made Pokemon for me. It's what gave my friends and me just reason as a child. It was how they marketed Pokemon back then too, for all those generations. So to have cut this aspect from the games, it was cut at the very core of what I felt Pokemon is. It was cutting at the spirit of Pokemon, so to speak. I know I'm in the minority now, but it's just a bummer that I can't bring some of those Pokemon from Gen 3 onwards. That means some ribbons now are locked for some of the Pokemon. Some Pokemon can't get those ribbons anymore because they weren't in Sword and Shield. So they can't get the Galar Champion ribbon, which means there's separate ribbon dexes now even. That's not even universal anymore. Some have more than others. It's the same for Paldea in this current generation we're in, at the time of the video at least. Pokemon was about having those buddies with us, big or strong, weak or tiny. But now it's more about efficiency and supplying the competitive scene, I feel. Speaking of the competitive scene, good lord, the meta was impossible for me to enter, even probably back in Gen 4. But at least it felt far off, in another world even. I think this had to do with PBR at the time. They had their own dedicated game to fighting, and it looked good and it felt thrilling. Even for casual players like me, it was a good marketing tool when you battled with your friends. When you were trading, you were battling, at least on PBR. But now the mainline games are also the games where the meta fighting takes place. And I think the separation of having a dedicated game where the meta can take place and look good helped with this unknown's anxiety of mine. I couldn't put it together until this script. Yeah, it was an anxiety, even back then. They had their fighting game. I had my collecting game. And I think it was because of these two formats merging that it's caused some infighting, as well as the meta, it draws more crowds. They're going to win over the collectors like me, even those who collect greatly more than I do. Catch rates are up for all the Pokemon, to the point that you can even catch legendaries with one Pokeball. Nature mints, stat boosting items, bottle caps, they all help making the Pokemon more efficient. The most efficient you can make it, even. And then add to that, you're slimming down the Pokedex. and moves that help eliminate any unwanted interference, as I'd like to call it. It's just concession after concession. But at least for us collectors, they made shiny hunts and shiny Pokemon easy to get because the catch rates are up. I feel like that's more a secondary effect. I don't have any personal hatred for the meta. All I'm saying is that there are two camps, and corporate is on the meta side. I don't think there could ever be a competition where you could see who catches the most of a rare Pokemon, or whoever gets the shiny Pokemon first, let alone who can get the most Pokemon eggs and who gets the most shinies from those eggs. I'm just yarning here. They could make a competition and have it to where they learn special moves, and players participating at the same time that the competition is going on can learn those special moves for those Pokemon as well. Nothing like Celebrate, but moves that might be signature moves for the starters, for example. I feel by hindering the collectors and the collection aspect of Pokemon, it's more a game about who can make the most efficient and lean team, and who can use it the most effectively. It's why meta teams end up having a lot of the same Pokemon, similar movesets after all. And again, no beef with the meta, it's just an issue I've noticed. I don't know if it's because of games like Smite, Overwatch, and Fortnite. I don't know if it's games like this that are forcing Pokemon to go this way. They all have their certain ways to play after all, and one can easily get into playing the same set over and over and over again. After all, I saw it with my brother when he played Smite. In fact, I'd like to make a direct correlation to the meta of Pokemon and Smite. And, that's when a new god or goddess comes out. Their meta changes around that one, as it often needs rebalancing. In Smite, that's how it works. Same with Pokemon. As a new generation comes out, though they aren't rebalanced until the next generation after that, which means that these new Pokemon are just plain broken. At least with Smite, they'll hotfix and they'll issue patches, but I feel like Pokemon doesn't really do that. The difference, though, is we have teammates, or he had teammates at least. I used to play a little Smite, but there were teammates and you could choose from a huge roster. While that's inherently the same, I feel like Smite outclasses Pokemon in this regard. Because, well, there are certain Pokemon that are just bad, but with all the gods and goddesses in Smite, they're still viable. They still have their own strategy. It honestly makes that game much more fun because strategies can change even mid-battle. You can get different items and switch up the whole thing. I know it's getting deep with everything I'm talking about, but I just don't think items can be changed in the meta, regarding Pokemon at least. I'd like to see what people who collect, who are collectors like me, who have finished the Pokedexes like me, but don't partake in the meta. I'd like to see what y'all think. How do y'all feel about the meta and what direction Pokemon's going? Is it an issue or am I just complaining over nothing? Anyways, so we'll get back to Galar. I just can't say much about it. It just was. And to me, that's awful to say about a Pokemon game. And then a fear, at least that I had, came to fruition, and that was DLC. Being a Nintendo player, having games where I didn't really need DLC, I dreaded it. I dreaded DLC because I was scared it was going to become like EA does, where it's just DLC after DLC after DLC after DLC. And I knew if they did that, microtransactions would soon be entering. But if I had to choose one over the other, it'd be DLC 100%. So when these DLC were announced, I was like everybody else. I was expecting something beefy. That's when we go into looking for Rose's office, I guess, for Mo to do. He didn't have anything, unfortunately. I will say I did enjoy Crown Tundra, but I don't know. Is that the more liked of the two? I have no idea. It was also where I found out that legendaries could be shiny in the Dynamax adventures. My third one I fought was a Latios, and it turned out to be shiny. But that's pretty much where my praise ends. Okay, let's get back to the complaining. Why did they feel like they could log some of the best Pokemon behind a huge paywall. If we're not careful as a community, this is going to get even more gay kept. It's already happening. Even in Go, it's already happening. After all, look at all these community day tickets for Pokemon Go, where you get increased odds, increased shinies, and overall increased Pokemon IVs. It's just, that's where I feel like the microtransactions in the franchise are with Pokemon Go. Gosh, let me talk a little bit about Pokemon Go, at least the first half of it. After the pandemic started to peter out, that's around the same time I did it from Pokemon Go. Like I said, I put it up and put it down before a couple of times, but I really played it during the pandemic. I don't remember what Pokemon Day it was, but I won't forget that day because I was expecting it to be like during the pandemic where you can just put a scent or an incense out and they'd come to you pretty quick. I only ended up getting about 2 spawns that day, even with scents activated. And it was so frustrating. I felt like they were nixing all the pandemic benefits and forcing us to go back to normal. And it was a time when I still didn't feel safe going outside. I get sick easy. Even with the vaccine, I got COVID. I had a breakthrough. Thankfully, I did just fine. But that first time I had it, I was unvaccinated and it was just awful. And so, fear of that, especially with the newer strains, why were they putting money and us and our exposure at risk? Why were they putting our safety at risk? Anyways, personal notes aside from the pandemic, yeah, that's what happened, and I just I didn't understand it. I know they were making money for people staying inside and buying the Pokeboxes. I have no doubt, but that was the second time I had put down what I feel is a mainline Pokemon game. I know it's considered a side game, but let's be honest, it's a mainline game. You can move your Pokemon up to the mainline. It's a mainline. Along with quitting Pokemon Go, I was also looking for a way out of Sword and Shield as soon as possible. I honestly tried to enjoy it, but I just couldn't. Attacks just didn't feel that good for the most part, and the models were okay. There really wasn't a change with models from what I could tell, which makes this the third set of Pokemon where it's the same motions and looks. And the story, like I said, it was abysmal, and the world was just linear itself. Granted, there are two little circles, but they don't do much. How is anyone supposed to be engaged with these games, past the fact that it's just Pokemon? Ties to these Pokemon weren't as strong, even traveling with them all the way. I was steamrolling everything, which, okay, sometimes you want a game where you're like a god. You are just it. You're hot stuff, and you're steamrolling like that. Sometimes a game like that feels good. Now, I'm sure I've gotten more lean and efficient myself. I learned too, after all. But learning is also a double edged sword. Not only have I learned how to do well, not to fail, but I've learned what makes the game challenging or not by this point. I think the hardest fight was probably Kaboo, but it wasn't near as close with me against Winona in Gen 3, Cynthia in Gen 4, or Getis in Gen 5, or even Ultra Necrozma in Gen 7. And Leon was just a total pushover for me. My brother had a little bit of difficulty with that, but that fight for me it was so easy. The Pokemon fan in me wants to like it, but there's a side of me that desires a satisfying game that wants to forget it. We'll see what happens given the same amount of time as I've had with Gen 1 and 2. How Sword and Shield will there be any memories even? Who knows? I just think because of all the negative feelings, it's probably going to be forgotten. Especially the Dynamax and Gigantamax Pokemon. Oh gosh. While I'll forever cherish the Golden Rainbow Pikachu card, I'm not even going to bother with the regional forms either. I'm happy there are more outside of Kanto rather than it being 100% Kantoan. It's something that I'd like to forget just as much as Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Oh, gosh. BDSP, where do we even begin with that? We were all at a low. My brother and I, at least. I don't know about y'all, but we definitely were. It was my brother's generation coming up for the first remake. Or was it? It was actually Legendary Legends Arceus. So there were two? And I was happy and I was excited for this. And the chibi artwork, I didn't like that. For BDSP, no. Part of me wants to, part of me likes it, but the other part of me just is like, no, it needs to burn in a Viking funeral. It just, no. To say there was hype, that would be an overstatement. We were just at that point like, oh, hey, new games. And honestly, gosh, playing through BDSP, it was that. Silence. Gosh, I'm sure I even ended up with the same team I did when I was playing through Diamond, at least pre Elite Four, minus the Mew and the Jirachi. I felt it was an easy game pre Elite Four, and I liked the Underground, but good lord, the Underground. Gosh, they must have been researching the meta hardcore because holy heck, did they make them hard? And it was something I had not seen coming. And gosh, it was a kick to the teeth. I almost lost to Aaron, and then I outright lost to Bertha. I got buried by the sweet grandma. But at least I have the honor to say that I have lost to both Agatha and Bertha, so, I've lost to the two. Gosh. Needless to say, I decided to end up emulating Cynthia's team a little. I got a Roserade and I got a Garchomp. And, oh my gosh, Cynthia. That fight was embittering, to say the least. Actually, that's really all I can say for BDSP as a whole, as I reflect on it. It was embittering. Now, I'm a weird person. I like bitter foods. I like Brussels sprouts, even steamed Brussels sprouts. But I don't like bitter games. And that Cynthia fight took me at least 40 minutes. I know it did because I was showing my fiance. And all I know was I had found a ledge, and it was with my Empoleon against her Milotic. And I abused healing as much as I could just to get ready to continue fighting. Oh, Lord. When her Garchomp came out, I knew if I didn't hit at least one critical War of Time attack from my Dialga, I was going to lose. I missed the first and lost Dialga to one attack, and I was easily in the high 70s. Needless to say, I got a max revived, and I put it back out. I had one more Roar of Time. I hit, and it critted. And I won the match that way. While I was relieved, it was not in a good way. I like a good mopping. I've done it myself plenty of times, and I've had it done to me, much to my dismay, thinking I have a good team, and it's honestly hilarious, sometimes. But to have a final boss like that would even wipe competitive tournaments, it worried me then that competitive and the meta were seeping more and more in. And it was pushing out casual players like me, even in regular playthroughs. I do think Pokemon needs difficulty options, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't need to go from Animal Crossing to Doom and then to Dark Souls between the 8th gym, the Elite Four, and Cynthia. Now, let's talk a little bit about Raminus Park. Honestly, with all the gem mining one needs to do to even get one cartridge to unlock a legendary, it's just not worth it to me. I feel like I'm playing old school RuneScape that way. At least it's not pay to win like in Pokemon Go. I never thought I would miss the Hoopa rings from Oras in Generation, or just in Generation 6 in general, but I do now. Honestly, this has to be the worst way to unlock legendaries. Whoever did it, just well done, because I couldn't get those gems. My luck was just giving me terrible odds. I know it took me 2 full 8-hour days to get enough gems. I was showing my fiance at the time, me grinding and showing time after time, anytime I got even one gem. I know it was at least 2 full 8-hour days. I have the timestamps. I was just relieved. Yeah, it was just anytime I got a little gem, yeah, I just wanted to celebrate. I was looking for something to celebrate, even the tiny bitter victories. It's just something I did not want to do or even have the time to have at that point. It was just, I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not getting the legendaries. After a few weeks, I called my brother and I told him he was lucky. He had dodged a bullet because he did not end up buying the games. I lamented how we couldn't battle, but I was so glad he didn't get to see, honestly, what a disservice BDSP is. Before I gag from all this embitterment and the fact that there is improved music, I have to mention one more thing that I haven't heard really anybody talk about. And that's that the post game will be unplayable when it stops uploading patches for this. When the servers for the Switch inevitably shut down in the 2050s, those kids who are playing, God bless those kids who decide to play all the Pokemon games from the original all the way through, because this one they won't be able to do the post game and they're going to be stuck with the terrible music. So, no heat round for you 2050 kids. I realize I'm doing BDSP and Arceus in reverse, and that was intentional. Even though Nintendo has all but abandoned this game, Pokemon Company too, I'm certain my brother and I won't. It does have its problems, don't get me wrong, but with Legends Arceus, I couldn't have helped but felt enthralled in this world, and for the story, for the most part. Don't like how Dialga and Palkia look like horses, but that's about it for the Pokemon. And while the animations can be poor, they at least put some effort into the game, I think. It got a pass for me, and it got a pass for my brother. He still really is big into Monster Hunter, so, this wasn't a large switch for him at the time. While I'm okay with it, I'd rather it not be like that. I'm going to take what I can get at this point. I was at a low. I was at a real low. I felt like it was tailored specifically to the collecting community. There was so much to complete. Gosh, 100%. It was just for something for me that had been missing for a long time. It was just something that it felt so good. I know I'm a hoarder, but that's okay. It's okay. I felt like Pokemon were cheapened a little bit because I would have to be a certified Pokemon hoarder, but Pokemon Go is already doing that. We're in the same boat, I guess. But, this is literally a first game where we're making the Pokedex as we go. We're in uncharted territory that way. It was such a nice switch. Also uncharted was the Volo to Giratina fight. I think we've had battles like this before. We get healed within after his fight before we fight Gessis. But it didn't really feel even then as strong compared to what Volo and Giratina were. So you could imagine my brothers and my face whenever we saw Giratina, and it just decided to come out and fight us. Thankfully, I had another ledge again. It was thanks to my shaman, but my brother did not. So that revenge train had to come back to him, and while I got to laugh, he was having such a horrible time with that fight. At least I had a hard time catching it. He had a hard time battling it, so just full circle, I guess you could say. But let's complain a little. I do have some faults with Pokemon Legends Arceus. Speaking of Shaman, I really don't like this to the point of seething. How they put the mythical Pokemon Shaman and Darkrai behind essential paywalls. While my brother has Sword, because he didn't get BDSP, he can't get Darkrai. Well, that means he can technically finish the Pokedex. There's always going to be that one slot there in his Pokedex, and it's going to be the Darkrai. I asked him. I thought it was going to bother him, so I offered, hey, I'll get Brilliant Diamond on your Switch, and you can get Darkrai that way. And I offered that a few times to him. I honestly thought it was going to make him crazy, but it didn't. It really didn't. I asked him, are you fine with that? And he said, yeah, I'm fine with that. So just know that even though it bothers me, it doesn't bother him. So ultimately, that's fine. Another point that has me angry although less so now as time goes on, is that we can't hatch eggs in Legends Arceus. And I mean, Pokemon were hatching from eggs even back then. I don't understand why we couldn't have gotten a daycare up and running too. After all, it was about teaching people that they didn't need to fear Pokemon. So what a better way than starting a daycare for these people to leave their Pokemon only to come back to see that they have an egg. After all, people were going about their routines and leaving their Pokemon at home. Well, why not leave them at a daycare? So, that's just my opinion. Another thing that I'm sure probably made a lot of people upset is, and it made me upset, is that we couldn't explore Hisui completely. I was talking to his, like Monster Hunter and with zones and whatnot. And, I can understand the need for bases and outposts, but, why not have us construct new ones in the different areas? After all, Hisui's a huge place from at least how it was shown, so we could have head started the construction of different settlements as well. It just would have made the game that much more interesting, I felt. Made outposts where the different towns would eventually grow up being. And then one final thing they could have done is they could have re-released at least Pokemon Conquest. It was also centered around a region that looked just like Arceus after all. But I'm sure that one is just wishful thinking of ways to upgrade an already great game to give it just that much more juice. However, I've been around long enough to say that, we probably only have 2 or 3 more games like this before it gets shelved. I don't see it continuing on for some reason. They shelved Mystery Dungeon, they shelved Ranger, and they'll more than likely shelve this sort of side project. That's how I feel, at least. It just doesn't bring in money like the mainline games. It's kind of like a Dutch disease for Pokemon. Only the mainline games, they're the real commodity. It's unfortunate, but this is how the side series works, from what I've seen, like I said. And unfortunately, this time with such a great game was short, because now we're moving on to the current generation with Scarlet and Violet in Gen 9. Oh boy, Gen 9. I'm going to have to put a little disclaimer here. It's going to become more of a review, at least for this game, or these games. So just consider that this section is going to be by far the longest section, since I have the most to talk about from this one, and it's part of a reason why I felt like I need to make this video. But let's start at the very beginning, and it was with the Pokemon Direct that announced Gen 9. My brother and I watched it, and I've got to say, I found it funny that when they were finished with the trailer, they sure did shut that door super quickly. It was almost like they were saying, now get it! It was something I found funny. I pointed it out to my brother, and we both had a good laugh about it. I can't help but wonder if that was representative of something truly going on, or just am I reading too deep into it? Regardless, hype was in again, but it was definitely lessened and dulled. My brother was very much on the fence about it. With BDSP leaving me very embittered, and on the other hand, me enjoying Legends Arceus, it was just kind of a conflicting. It was very conflicting with the feelings. I was ground zero for the battle to be had between the feelings. And honestly, I think as the games came closer and closer, hype started to fade. I was still excited to play the game, but it was just to play and see the new Pokemon. I was I was getting more fearful of similar mistakes from Sword and Shield being made in Scarlet and Violet. I was hoping they would have learned their lesson. We'll talk about that, but yeah, that was in the back of my mind as I began to play the game. Flaws it did have, and this one was just to the point where it was more we were playing, where I was playing at least, to see the errors, anything funny, frustrating, or downright game breaking, just to relay to my fiance and my brother. That's how bad it got for me. Was I had to have if I wasn't laughing and having fun with it, I probably would have been crying. It was that much of a mess. It was also the first mainline game where my brother decided not to play it. I was really on my own. None of my old friends, nobody from Mexico playing it. And now even my brother wasn't even playing it. I was the only one on this path. I can't blame my brother. He's busy with college now. And even though I offered to buy it for him, he just wasn't convinced it would be a good game. Sadly, he wasn't off point either. And yet again, I called to let him know just how many glitches there were and the hilarity of it all. Even that first night, we'd laugh at the shoddiness. It just, honestly, it was so frustrating at times. Just because I would get locked in a glitch and I couldn't move. And because of the glitches and especially the lag, I just had to put it down out of sheer frustration. I got to the point that I couldn't play it. I have to be honest, I had to ask my fiance what made me quit. Because by the time I started writing the script, I'd already forgotten why. That's talk about locking up a memory quick. Needless to say, my fiance has a better memory than I. Because not only did I forget it was lag, but I honestly thought I had Scarlet, and I have Violet. I honestly forgot what version I had. It was that underwhelming to me. I forgot the version I had. Now, buying something only for me to put it down and come back a few weeks later or months later, that's not out of the ordinary for me. It's what I've done ever since I was young, according to my parents. When I come back to something, I come back to it loyally until I either broke that item or decided it was time to move on. Again, according to my parents. Games, for the most part, have been the same with this little quirk of mine. I think that's why I've had such a struggle putting Pokemon down. Nothing better has truly come around, and I hadn't decided it was time to move on. But let me state that Violet officially broke this trend. It took my fiance coaxing me and asking me to beat the game. He wanted to see what the ending would look like. And not wanting to disappoint, I picked it up again. I was curious too, but it was only because of him that I finished the game. Just know that. Looking back on it, story-wise, it wasn't bad. I even had fun with DJG Rave. That little guy, he's the MVP. He's the most valuable Pokemon of the entire game. It's not Miraidon or Koraidon. It's not Qualkiva or Toadschool. It's DJG Rave. And then Arvin's Mbostiff gets second. And then Miraidon and Koraidon and Charlos. Who could forget little Charlos after all? Speaking of Arvin, I feel like what they did with the storyline, splitting it into 3 plots, I think that was genius. At first, I was fearful, but they pulled it through. They honestly pulled it through. Now, granted, each one needs to be completed in the game in order to experience the full story, but I just like the fact that there's so much freedom. You can move between the stories as much as possible. You're not plot locked, so to speak. So I tried to keep everything as close to my level as possible, and did that well for the most part. 2 of the Team Star fights with Aerie and especially Mela ended up giving me very hard times. When I got to Mela, it was the last badge I needed. And just because of my team makeup, she ended up making very short work of me. And that was mainly because of Arboliva's ability, Seed Sower. With her Rev of Room, she managed to not only stall me, but she kept getting stronger, and then she's also healing every turn because of Seed Sower. It was the only boss fight I lost to in this game. I'll talk about AI Turo in a bit. But honestly, it felt great. That mopping felt great. It really showed a weakness in my team, and I really had to recalibrate. So I got Bramble in because I thought, well, I want a grass type still. And I like Bramblin, so I got it out and evolved it to a Bramblegeist to help me. And it turns out it wasn't that strong. That's fine. That's okay. I ended up brute forcing my way with Skeledirge. Yeah, that's my choice. I chose Fuecoco. And anytime Skeledirge got in the red, I would just heal it up and keep going. I was wanting to get on to the Elite Four and then to the champion fight after all. So that's why I brute forced my way, especially because my fiance was just waiting this whole time and I was really far behind. So it's like, okay, hold on. This is going to take about a week or so. As I kept going, there's just something compelling me to finish everyone's quest line too. I really got into the story. I figured we'd go to Area Zero afterwards when we finished Arvin. Oh gosh, Arvin I don't remember the names. I'll have to look farther. But when we completed the 3 storylines, I was like, okay, we're gonna go to Area Zero, and I sure was spot on. After what was surprisingly a difficult director fight for me, I battled Cassiopeia, or Penny, and I thought it was going to be easy because she only had evolutions, and it turned out no, there were actually some fast ones pulled on me, which I was happy. They weren't weak. I was actually really happy. They had buffs, but I got cocky too in that fight, and so thinking they're evolutions after all, I just got so cocky. But thankfully, it was a good fight. And on a personal note, I want to say I really feel for Penny. When my charter school closed its high school doors, I was forced to go to a public school for 10th grade, and it was really terrifying. Thankfully, I wasn't bullied, but I suddenly was a nobody. Just as Penny had her Pokemon for her, I had mine during that hard time when I first went to high school. That's okay, we eventually make it, and we make friends from it. So, as for Nimona, I really like her character. It honestly reminds me of how I was playing when we were in Gen 4, and how my brother and my friends and I would get together and we would just battle. I saw that aspect of me in her, and I was glad to have a rival feel the same. It was really refreshing that way. Even though I was on this path alone, at least there was a character rival in game who felt honestly the same way as I did, with wanting a challenge just to see how strong we've gotten. Out of 3 themes, I like hers the most, especially the last fight. In a way, she reminds me of Bloomberry, but not as cocky nor as obnoxious. She likes to fight, and she wants to find the best fighter in the world, and she wants to challenge and eventually surpass them. I can understand that. And lastly, we have Arvin. Oh my gosh, what a kicker of a story that was. His story raised actual debate within my family when I brought up the question of AI, and if they could subsume people they were made to intimidate, or at least imitate. Imitate rather than intimidate, sorry. Everyone felt uneasy from it, and although I'm usually pro AI myself, I kind of hesitate even here too. Is it really right for AI to have this undue burden placed upon it? Usually we look at it from the human point, but what about from the AI's point? Would it feel the need to honor said memories and continue them? Or would it feel more entrapped? I think we can see this struggle here with AI Turo as he comes to reconcile that Arvin's father, that's him, he's Arvin's father, yet at the same time, he's his own being, essentially. What about Arvin? Doesn't he get a say in the matter since it directly concerns him as well? Yeah, he might have been a kid when the real Turo passed away, but when a child's evolved, it raises other issues as well. So I'll get off the AI talk. I know people don't really like the hot button topic, but just know that this story in particular really had real life implications for my family, at least when we talked about AI, how we've come to think about them. Second kicker in his journey was to heal his Mabostiff. I would just be downright lying if I said I wasn't crying while watching, and especially tearing up while he's talking about all this. I've had 3 dogs in my lifetime, and they've all passed away, from 2 from age, 1 from cancer. I know how it feels when you watch them just age, and in particular for the dog who died of cancer, as they get worse that way. And it was clearly visible to those who've had a pet to know just how close his Mabostiff was really at death's door. He was right there, basically. To see Arvin go to the ends of the world to heal his companion, I'd be right on that road with him if I had a chance to save my dogs. If it just meant that much more time with them, I'd be right there with him. It was definitely a home run story, that's for sure. It's a story about a kid and his dog, and what can I say? Everybody just loves stories like that, especially when the dog lives. So, lastly, before Area Zero, we have the Elite Four and Champions. And I really liked the interview they gave before being able to challenge the Elite Four. I mean, we're in school after all, so a test is fully expected. At least I thought. However, the battles themselves were rather underwhelming. And La Prima herself, she was so underwhelming. I think I'd rank her with Diantha. It's not that high of a ranking, but I don't know. I'd have to rank everything to see how she falls overall. And honestly, Nimona should have been the champion we fought, and then La Prima after. They should have done it that way and strengthened La Prima's team, or at least changed the Pokemon. Nimona really would have culminated the whole journey that way. It would have been coming around full circle, while La Prima could have filled in more of an administrative role and challenged only in the post game. Okay, so now we'll get to the meat of the game, Area Zero. Honestly, if I could have explored this with my friends and brother, honestly, this is imagine how it would have gone. The dialogue would have been different between us, just a little bit, but it would have been like that, exploring with Arvin, Penny, and Nimona, and just everyone talking and making observations and whatnot. Can I just say, this area is stunning. It's completely different from the rest of Paldea, and it really feels like its own region. Working our way down to the truth, constantly going circles around it, it's just great symbolism through and through. The paradox Pokemon here, they're just so amazing in my opinion. I like the futuristic ones more, but having Pokemon from the past as well, that's just amazing. One thing I don't understand is why we can't evolve them or get eggs from their pre-evolution forms, but it is what it is. I'd like to think that in the future they still have eggs at least, and certainly with the past they were having eggs. It's just a personal thing again. After we finally get down to the truth and into the lab, I was of course shocked to learn that Turo had died. And again, my fiance he definitely had a reaction from this too. It was the first time, they had killed off anyone in a Pokemon game. Of course, it had to be the hottest guy or the hottest girl with Sadia. It's just like, what? And then, of course, we get to their fight, and honestly, as I listen to their music every now and then, I'm just amazed that such a battle could come from this. Whereas Cynthia from BDSP left me embittered, this one I had a feeling that it was going to be tough. After all, we worked through a whole illegal zone just to get to him. Oh boy, I was proven right. I got clapped so hard. I honestly don't know how I made it through, but I did. And I've got to say, my dumb brain was like, well, they're futuristic paradox Pokemon. You got to use fire moves. They're metallic. And it was because of that, I was getting stomped so much. I had to actively change my way of thinking. It was finally a battle where not only was I just healing to win, but because I was actively trying to figure out what the heck I was doing, it was just a really good fight that way. I hadn't had a fight like that since about Gen 6. I don't mind being told if my stats are up or down, but a little pet peeve of mine is I don't like it. I don't like it when they tell you that the move is super effective or not effective against it. I feel like it takes away from Pokemon, but regardless, I ended up working it out and figuring out what two typings they were, roughly. After all, I didn't want them to look them up, but when I did, I found I was spot on for all of them except for Iron Thorns. I had figured out every typing for all those Paradox Pokemon that Turo used. So after conquering that battle, because the AI didn't calculate for spam healing items, we watched the two Miraidon fight, and ours win. And then, of course, we see off AI Turo as he goes to have his own Pokemon adventure. Or Sadia, if you have Scarlet. And honestly, I wish I could have gone. It would have been so cool seeing even more futuristic Pokemon that way, and prehistoric Pokemon. With that last story complete, we all went back to the surface, and that last scene of us were walking on the road with Penny, Arvin, and Nimona is honestly one of the most heartwarming scenes for me. I'd like to imagine that's how we all be, my old friends, my brother and I. And honestly, I'm glad that I was walking alone, but at least I had companions, even if they were just NPCs. And for that, I'll be eternally grateful for. That was heartwarming, wasn't it? Leaves it off on a nice note. Makes it feel like it's a bow all wrapped up nice. Fortunately, that's not how this is going to go. If you thought this was a 3-play act, well, guess what? Unfortunately, it's a tragedy. You see, that was only the second act. Nonetheless, while the story for the game is one of the best that Pokemon has ever had, it's just undone by the sheer brokenness of the game. After all, remember, that's why I put it down in the first place. And that's why I put it down again. I honestly don't see how this game shipped with such poor optimization or quality, and I honestly blame the stockbrokers and the schedule. I also feel like there's something far more insidious going on, and quite frankly, cancerous even. But speculation is best for speculation after all. And these companies have been notoriously tight-lipped about everything going on, so unfortunately that's all this is going to be good for. It's just that speculation. Could it be the seasonal game cycle we found ourselves in? Absolutely. Or what about the DLC taken away from how they figure out how to do a mainline game and then cut and piecemeal it and then attach everything through the DLC? It could be that too. It could be the stockbrokers or one of the three companies doing this. That's also a possibility. But just realize that at the time of writing this script, I'm almost 30. I'm not their main demographic anymore. Even with the nostalgia, it's more now to introduce a new target demographic to these regions. I can't have Kanto and pushback anymore. I feel it's not valid. I don't want to deprive these kids growing up of not exploring Kanto for the first time, even though it will have been my fourth or fifth time. And I feel that my say as a fan shouldn't have more say than that as a new Pokemon player. Like I said, I want the best for these kids, and my say should be going to defend them because they don't quite grasp the games. They don't understand all the glitches and all the unoptimization. Quite frankly, isn't normal. It should not become the norm. They need good games. Violet's the only game that I've had that actively lagged so hard on me. It crashed, Pokemon wise. The second time I put it down, it was because I was showing my brother and father the game as I was exploring Area Zero. I believe he had come over for his birthday. My father was in the kitchen cooking, getting ready to grill since my brother wanted something grilled. And I decided, hey, I'll pitch Scarlet and Violet to my brother. He hasn't actively seen it outside of the glitches. There's a real chance here that maybe I can pull him back in, show him that it's not all glitchy. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it was super laggy. And gosh, I can't tell you how embarrassing it felt whenever it glitched and crashed twice. I was in Area Zero at that time, and it glitched and crashed twice. And even when I was just exploring, not even with Miraidon, just on foot, it was glitching so hard. Battles were glitching. Moves were. It was just. If it wasn't glitching, it was lagging. After all the glitches and the lag, and the two crashes, I decided I would go ahead and leave Area Zero. And I decided, well, I know I have to do the post game and rebeat all the gym leaders again, so I went to Katie, the bug type gym leader. And even this part was so laggy. It didn't help that, it was raining. And I was just honest to goodness thinking it was going to crash, especially when she terrestrialized. It didn't. But gosh, it was so bad that my father was even making comments on the lag. And I'm sure, he's watched us play the games as we grew up, especially the Pokemon ones. But for him to comment on lag, it just made my brother and I look at each other and go, this isn't for us. Honestly, I felt so humiliated. Pokemon had been a bastion for me to be proud of. Here I was trying to pitch it to my brother, and not only for me to come out feeling humiliated, but just honest to heavens above tired of the corporatism from Pokemon. Yeah, it was, you can see, it was not a good time. And while it's not EA levels bad, it is bad nonetheless, and we'll get back to that in a bit. I want the very best for my future children. I really do. Even for the kids now and the adults that still play. I want the best for them. I want the kids in particular to play video games that'll inspire them and make them yearn to explore and catch every Pokemon out there. But with the games just going more and more to the meta side, and them just deciding what they can cut out, what and where, it's just major aspects of the Pokemon spirit are just getting cut out right and left anymore. That makes me sad. It really does. And they say nostalgia is a strong emotion, and a sad emotion, above all. And I truly believe it. I know when my children play Pokemon, they'll have the old cartridges to play with. And I'm sure my fiance and I will play with them. I want the best for them. And if it means the best are the old games on the old system cartridges, well, then why fight the past when we can embrace it and use it to fight the corporatism? That and then downloading and playing the fan games online as well. Most of these Pokemon fan games, they've honestly had more work put into them. I guess Pokemon just feels threatened by them. I don't know how they can take away from the sales, but they say they do, somehow. I truly think what Gabe Newell said about piracy being a service problem is absolutely true. There's a reason why these fan games use the old sprites. There's a reason why they create new stories to tell, new Pokedexes for new regions, even difficulty settings, and battling better. Not only this, but leaving some things up to the imagination does more than actually seeing how the animations will play out. For example, with different attacks, I imagine different reactions with the Pokemon. After all, you're gonna react differently when you've been vine whipped compared to being burned by Ember. Pokemon Stadium 2, Coliseum, XD, and PBR all fall into this problem hole. But their animations for being attacked were also just much more vibrant as well. It's like an odd grab bag for them. Unfortunately, though, that can't be said for Gens 6 through 9. It's been 3 generations now that, for the most part, animations of these attacks and of being attacked have remained the same. That little flash of the Pokemon getting hurt does more than Gen 6 through 9, simply because we have to use our imaginations to fill the gap. Oh, let's see what more I have to say before I get to the grand statement I made at the beginning. Is what I would say, but some information has come to light. They're not good. They're just not good. So really enjoy some more of me complaining and more praising and laughing because, I will include the new developments right after this. But getting back to Scarlet and Violet, the Spanish, me gusta demasiado. I like it a lot. A region based off of Iberia was so fascinating to me, mainly since my father's side comes from Valencia, which oh my gosh, it looks gorgeous as Lavencia in the game. I think I'm one of the few that could say they have a Pokemon game based on their origin city. Aside from this, the names of the Pokemon are just amazing too. Arboliva is one of my favorite ones due to this, and it really pulled its weight for me as well. NaCl, Knucklestock, and Garganacl are also great mentions, mainly because of NaCl being the element that makes up table salt. And, oh gosh, Miss Goza. That is just, it makes me laugh. It makes me chuckle every now and then when I see the name. Um, I really think the games could use the Latin American Spanish version in particular, because at least when I was in Mexico, the, they would use gozar in, let's just say, for personal pleasure between a couple. So to hear mesa meaning table and goza meaning, yeah, you can see where I was laughing every time I saw the name. Now, that could have been just, my exes talking whenever I asked them what gozar meant. But the fact that I'm getting two responses that are the same when they're from two different parts of Mexico, I don't think that's much of a coincidence. Second to last thing, terrestrializing. I say keep it. I liked it a lot. And the fact that Pokemon can be knocked out of it is great. I don't know if that counts for trainer battles, but if it isn't, it needs to be a feature. Honestly, I think it's one of the best mechanics since Shadow Pokemon and Megas. Honestly, we're one step closer to getting Crystal Onyx from the Orange Isles that way. Last thing, why are the evolutions starting to get so super complex and convoluted? This happened in Arceus too, but I was saving it for this part in particular. There's no way in 100 years I would have figured out how to get Bisharp into King Gambit, or as I call mine, Queen Gambit, since it's a she. Evolutions just don't need to be this convoluted. Make them a trade evolution, or better yet, have them level up with an item they're holding, or do like Flicky Licky, Tangrowth, Ambipom, and Yanmega, and have them know a move and level up. I just don't understand it. Primeape was okay. Going from Primeape to Annihilate, that was okay, I felt. But even then, that was still pretty convoluted, at least for me. So this wraps up Gen 9, but unfortunately, it doesn't wrap up everything yet. I need to mention that since I finished the script, I put it down for about 2 months, and I had my 30th birthday. That's right, I'm the big 3-0 now. But not only that, I also went to Bangkok to finally see my fiance so we could begin the visa process. Since Bangkok is a capital city, I decided to re-download Pokemon Go and Pikmin Bloom, and I played both, especially Pokemon Go since we both enjoy Pokemon, and he'd also like to learn more. I thought everything was fine with Go, just as I left it off, but I've come to figure out that issues like Pokemon Space, gym spoofers, and decor Pokemon, and I'm sticking with that, have not been resolved. It seems to have ballooned more than anything else, especially with this past Halloween event we just had. Let's see. All 4-sized Pumpkaboo with hats, followed by 4-sized Gorgeist with hats, Gengar with costume, Pikachu with costume, and then shortly after followed by Cubone, Marowak, Duskull, Dusclops, and Dusknoir with a marigold crown. Did I miss any? It's insane. And honestly, it needs to stop. I know why they're doing it, and it's one of the main reasons why I put down the game again. But let's talk about that other reason. The much more larger main reason why I put down the game again. And honestly, what is now a main factor for me to stop playing Pokemon as a whole. I got to feel this creeping up on me and then suddenly ambushing me, so y'all will too. Because it was a fiasco, just what I learned, let me tell you. I think I was while I was in Bangkok when it was announced that all the 3DS and Wii U services would soon stop. Or at least in the week of me coming back and recovering from jet lag. Now, I knew the eShop had closed, but Pokemon Bank was still working. Well, with this news, it would mean you needed to move your Pokemon or forever lose them, because now they're locked onto the 3DS and DS systems at least. That's fine. Have until April to move them. No problem, I thought. But I don't have enough space in Pokemon Go for all the Pokemon that I've caught, especially since I was catching for my fiance, so I had doubles. So I decided to focus on Go first, before moving all the Pokemon up. I didn't want to move them to Pokemon Home. I didn't think at that time you could get them back. I looked it up, and you can't. Once they're in home, they're locked to home. You can't migrate them back to Pokemon Go. Well, heck. So I looked it up if it was okay to have 2 accounts in Pokemon Go. Well, it's not, and I don't want to get my account banned. So you know what I did? I just used one of my other emails and put Go onto an old phone of mine to get extra storage. That's what I thought, until I figured out that you needed to be level 10 to trade. So that took a day because, living in a desert town, nothing, thank you. So now I'm level 10, and I can hold only 300 Pokemon. That's okay. That's no worries. I have at least 300 more spaces. I know Stardust is needed to trade, so it'll help me get the pilot mantle. After all, I have a ton of Bangkok Pokemon, and I'm just about halfway around the world from Bangkok. Oh, but I don't have enough Stardust? Why doesn't it tell you how much Stardust you need for trades you can't make? Fine, whatever. But I can only trade 1 Pokemon to that account that it doesn't have per day? And I still don't have enough Stardust. What is this? Well, what about trading Shadow Pokemon? I have doubles of the ones I do have as well. And some of them are Pokemon in that second account already. No? Well, at least that one makes sense, since you can't trade Shadow Pokemon in Colosseum and XD. Okay. Well, I have a Phantup that has 13 out of 15 IVs. So I'll trade it and then trade it back because I really like Trevenant. What? I can only trade 1 Pokemon 1 time? Or a Pokemon 1 time? Do you see how ridiculous this is getting, audience? It's just... oh my gosh. We could trade Pokemon all day and night in the past, but this? There's just too many regulations and rules regarding trade anymore. At least with Pokemon Go. It's utterly ridiculous that we went from a time where a friend could help out others by trading even 2 Pokemon that someone didn't have for free, when the only rule being don't take the link cable out or cut the transmission between the consoles, to now all this red tape for just a simple trade. It's just not worth trading in Pokemon Go. What with how valuable Stardust is, no thank you. So, while I was in this maelstrom, I decided I'll bite the bullet and I'll go ahead and download Pokemon Home. Or re-download it at least. I made peace with it, and I'm just gonna have to send some Pokemon over there. Now, I thought the premium pass was $7.99 for some reason. So you can just imagine my reaction when I saw that it was $15.99 for the year. It's honestly just sickening, all of this. It's greedy, and it honestly reminds me of what EA and Jagex are doing to their games with all the microtransactions. So, not willing to pay out of pocket for a franchise I feel doesn't deserve mine or my future family's money, I just decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and send out the Pokemon that I don't want and that I already have in both Home and Go. I knew I wouldn't use them, so I'm going to go ahead and offload. But any Pokemon that I do want to keep, I'll go ahead and send them up to Sword. That's also what I would have said. But the transporter from Pokemon Go that connects to Pokemon Home is special, and it also requires energy to send to Pokemon Home. And then it has to recharge. Oh my gosh. If you didn't know, you can only send so many Pokemon before that energy is run out. And from what I can tell, it takes a full week for it to fully recharge. And I'm not going to pay coins for it to refill automatically. Okay, fine. I'll just send 2 Shiny Abra, so it won't take that long. And hold on, what's this mystery box? It's black with a red and blue stripe on it. Well, apparently I decided to have my own little mini Pokemon community day because Meltan just appeared like I had honestly laid out all the metal on the earth for it to eat. Talk about being massively unprepared, but I caught him. And gosh, who knew all I had to do to get one was just send some Pokemon to home. I'd been trying forever to finish that research task all the way back when it first came out, and I thought it was one of a kind, but nope. It just turns out it's actually pretty freaking common when you know what to do. And oh my gosh, that was just the table flipping moment right there. All my work that I've been doing, it was just erased. Between getting rid of all the Pokemon that I didn't need, and purifying them, and then getting rid of them, only for Meltan to essentially undo all my work. If you can't tell, I'm pretty worn down, even reading this again. I just wanted to transfer some Pokemon, and I can't. I just can't. Every time I think and begin to do something, there's a wall or a hurdle, and I have to repivot again. It's just easier for my fiance to just catch these Pokemon. There's no sense in me safeguarding these Pokemon for him. Except for like the gajillion and one decor Pokemon. Nonetheless, this was a task I had set out to do. Wait a week and transfer the ones I didn't want. At least to home and then to Sword. And now dumping at least 80 Meltan as well. So I figured, hey, Meltan's kind of a rarish Pokemon, right? Wonder what I can trade it for on home. After all, the GTS is here now. What's this? I can't even trade it here? Well, let me search for it. Oh. I can't trade special Pokemon. What? So now you're telling me that I can ask for special Pokemon, only to see it there and know it'll never be traded. How the hell did the GTS get to being so bad? It has to be like a glitch, right? It has to be something they don't know about. It's been well known for a while now, and there's been no fix? Wow. Honestly, I feel like I'm entering into a Fallout 76 scenario. That's okay. So to Sword they go, since they can't be in Violet. Hopefully I can just Runder trade them away. Well, while I'm waiting, I'll go ahead and move up some Pokemon from the old Pokemon games. I've got another 3DS, so we're fine trading up this way. I might have to buy a DS real quick to move them from the older games, from the GBA games. But I still have time. I just need to get Pokemon Bank on the 3DS. I can't. Did I download and delete it? Maybe I can re-download it. No. Neither DS has it downloaded or ever had it downloaded. And with the eShop being closed, I'm locked out from moving them. It was at this moment at 9 p.m. on October 29th that my Pokemon life and my Pokemon career had effectively died. All the decades of catching, decades of filling the Pokedex, decades of finding shiny Pokemon, hatching, raising, trading, battling, decades of having Pokemon as friends from all these regions. Most are now just locked into 3DS games. It's the second time Pokemon has done this now, but this time it's been deliberately done, not by accident. Now, the writing on the wall was there. It was there for sure. And I should have gotten Pokemon Bank, but I didn't. Life had gotten in the way again for me to heed this warning. But Pokemon You should have made the warning louder. I can't tell you how many legendaries I have, aside from the hacked ones, or even regular Pokemon that I would have brought forward. My old Blaziken, or that shiny Poochyena that's now a Mightyena. The Pokemon from old friends that I honestly don't even know if they're alive anymore. My brother's Pokemon. Naturally, I called him right away, after telling my fiance first. And he was just floored by everything that I had just told you. Even so, he was saddened that he couldn't move his Pokemon either, to Sword at least. And then I realized, not only did my career end, my Pokemon career, his did too. Sometimes I just want to break down and cry. It's just too much for me to realize I sunk so much money, time, and tears. Not just me, but my brother as well. It was my life for my life. But now, I don't know. It's not anymore. Pokemon snapped. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So you once were, so you will return. I need to wrap this up with a conclusion of sorts. Even though I won't continue with Pokemon anymore, I want it to be clear that it will always have a fond place in my heart and within my memories. I also want it to be clear that I want what's best for children and for the adults who stay playing Pokemon. Nobody deserves an unoptimized, glitchy, and unplayable game. Nobody deserves limits on Pokemon with ridiculous fees and microtransactions. Pokemon themselves used to be truly valued, especially the shiny ones. But quite honestly, that value anymore is nil thanks to games like Go, and even Legends Arceus to an extent. I truly do believe that this hardware we have now can fully handle all the Pokemon and all the attacks. They did it with Stadium, Stadium 2, Coliseum, XD, and Battle Revolution in particular. They can do it here too. But the change will only come from y'all who are still playing the games. Stand up and demand better. If you truly want quantity over quality, then I understand. But if you want improvement, you've got to fight back monetarily and socially. You've got to make them understand that your dollar bill is first and foremost your dollar bill. It's not theirs. When you pull together to threaten all at once, hold fast. Just because change looks like it's coming doesn't mean it is. After all, what I saw between Gen 8s and Gen 9 has really held true to that. We thought Gen 8 was bad, and it turned out it's Gen 9 that's the worst. Joking aside, would I let my kids play Pokemon? It's honestly a hard choice. Mainly because the games are in such a terrible spot right now. Especially when it comes to microtransactions, and to a lesser extent, the DLC. Honestly, I'd say just get the fan games. And I'd get the fan games, and I'd put them on the Switch for them. I've done crazy things computer-wise before. That won't be any different. Will I keep up with Pokemon or even play Pokemon Go with my fiance? If he wants. After all, I want him happy. But on an individual level, no. I don't think I will keep up with Pokemon. I wish the franchise the best, but I'll never forget how it killed my own Pokemon career in life.